but then there was a senseless attack on customs, and I am obligated to speak on their behalf. I'll address some issues very quickly in relation to customs. I said earlier, the past this debate, not today, that they didn't have adequate parking. It still remains so today. As a matter of fact, I just spoke to a customs officer who told me that they have remedied the dark areas at the airport by renting a tower from Carl Williams, but under so they can see.
Mr. President, on a point of elucidation, if I may, I believe I'm hearing the word now, adequate parking. Before that was not the statement that was made, and I'm happy to know that at least there was parking. Thank you, sir.
You cannot elucidate my speech, you know, but but I gave it nonetheless because we want to see what you were going to do next. Mr. President, I maintain, that customs officers are very vital to the security of this country, and I do not like when they are attacked when they're doing their duty. The first instance you talk about where they refuse a letter from the minister. The minister already read the letter. The letter comes from the permanent secretary in the ministry, but the minister get carried away and start writing letters. The ministers get too excited. I don't do their job. They're responsible for policy. So if a customs officer sees something come from a minister, he said, ministers don't write these things. They come from the permanent secretary within the ministry. I said, when you were a minister, you don't get involved with those kind of things. You let PS do them. But be that as it may, or be that as it is, I would prefer to mention a couple of things. Last time I spoke about the police taking over the customs area at the airport. And it was causing some stress among the customs officers. I'm happy to report that they have pulled back somewhat, and the police are not so up in your face at the airport since that presentation. But it is funny now, because the police now have a situation where a civilian is taking over security for an event. Is a United Nations event. I understand the former commissioner of police, who is now a civilian, will be responsible for policing, because that's what it is. And as far as I know, only the police force, the commissioner of police, is responsible for security in this place. But government is doing what it like. Mind you, I said I'm not opposing the bill, but these are things that I want to draw to the country's attention. You cannot take away the power of the commissioner of police to be responsible for security, talking about you getting somebody else. I don't care how much you like them, how much you want to give them a perk. It is wrong. Now let me address the bill itself. I didn't want to, because it's a non-contentious issue. But as I have my feet, I will speak to a few things. These two bills, first of all, the customs bill, the customs amendment, number 2 bill, a lot of the amendments that we have there are already existing powers of the customs. You find them in the customs regulations. So you didn't need all of it. You didn't need most of it, because the powers already exist. But somebody get carried away, didn't know that they were there, and put them in the act now. But they were in the regulations already. Okay. The other aspect of the terrorism, we have to do it if we want to remain part of the international community. It's as simple as that. Because if you do not get the buy-in from the banks overseas, the banks are not going to deal with Barbados. We don't have a public correspondent banking. If we don't have these regulations in place, these laws in place, we will not be able to trade with the outside world just now. So, as I said, I was not opposed to the bill. We are being forced into this situation because we really don't have any power in the international thing. We got to go along with it or else. It's as simple as that. So, So as I said, I had no difficulty letting this thing pass without debate. But people like troubling me. I don't know why. You know? So, Mr. President, I just want to make it clear that if you trouble customs officers, you're troubling me. They pay me to speak on their behalf. I don't get paid for speaking here. People who pay me, I must speak for them. Customs officers do not make laws, or they do not, what they do, they interpret what they have. And no, not necessarily even interpret. They are given directions, and even though customs officers, the senior level, are required to have an LLB, they can't even use that LLB. When they have a legal problem, they have to send it to the Solicitor General. So when the customs officer said, well, I can't sign off on this, it isn't because he won't be spiteful or he won't be mean. It is because this is the procedure that we have been given. If you have a minister who don't know what he's doing and want to get involved in all kinds of things, next thing you know, you can be in New York with a bracelet and have an anklet because they're getting things that they should concern them. Let the civil service know what they are doing. Ministers should, they come in you, and people say about ministers, a guy has no knowledge of a particular area, and you make him a minister, and he becomes an expert. But you still have to deal with the real experts. And when the real experts say, minister, you can't do that, you find that there are problems. I will speak to some of that in the next bill. I don't want to preempt myself. But suffice it to say, sir, customs officers are loyal agents, but they also have to be to protect their own jobs. And if you make a mistake, you see it with nobody or the general report. So they are doing their duty. They're doing it to the best of their ability. If you have one or two that will cause a problem, it is one or two. But you cannot label customs officers, you can't paint them with all with the same brush. You will say all opposition senators the same? And the only two of us? You see that you can't label people like that. And just go to two.
One good and one bad.
Just out of two. Just out of two. Just out of two. You just out of two. No, you're exactly making the point I'm making. You cannot judge people because one or two persons do something to you. That's what I'm doing. And you can't judge customs officers because you had an incident being in your bonnet where the minister overstepping his authority and you want to make it look as though the customs officer do something wrong. The problem here is that more officers in public service need to tell ministers, excuse me, minister, with all due respect, you can't do that. But they go and get themselves in trouble because I have the power. I have a situation now with a young lady. She's working in a department, in the welfare department, and she assists a person to get a rural development house. And an MP blocked it, saying she didn't vote for him. Keep out of the public service business. I will call his name to the Prime Minister when it happens, not in here. Because I don't think that is. And I didn't give the President notice I was going to call his name, but I will speak, I will mention the Prime Minister. Right? So, sir, I support the amendment. Right? I have no difficulty with the amendment. There are minor things that I could quarrel about, but suffice it to say, these amendments are necessary to keep Barbados traded and keep us part of the national community. Sir, thank you very much.
Senator Goodrich.
Mr. President, I did not intend to speak at all. But Senator Franklin made a few comments just now. It provoked me to a certain extent. And I say that because, sir, I play my game of tonk every single day of the year. I play tongue every evening I get home. Even on Sundays I play tongue. Yeah, I play tongue. And the people I play tongue with, believe it or not, so many of them are fishermen. And they have complained to me of a statement made by Senator Franklin in this chamber last week. And it was a statement to the effect that a lot of guns coming into Barbados are brought by fishermen. And sir, today I heard from Senator Franklin once again, and he said, if you touch customs officers, you touch me. He said you can't label and paint all of the customs officers with the same brush. He said you cannot judge people because of what one or two of them do. And I do recall that in the same debate last week, Senator Franklin spoke glowingly on behalf of the customs officers. He defended them to the hilt. Many of them, he said, were now members of his union. The difference is, sir, that the fishermen do not belong to his or to any union. So they have become the scapegoats. There are the sacrificial lambs. There are the ones who bring guns into Barbados. I want to say, sir, that it is very easy, very simple for Senator Franklin to point fingers at our fishermen. And they did complain, and I am very serious about it. They did complain to me about it. I can even call the name of 6 of them, and I'm not going to do it. They complained to me about the statement. They felt hurt. They have no voice in the Senate. And they cannot respond to the accusations made by Senator Franklin or to anyone else that they are responsible for bringing guns into Barbados. He said of the customs officers last week, sir, that their breadfruit hang low. I want to say that the fishermen breadfruit hang even lower. Easy pickings. But our fishermen, sir, have feelings like anyone else. If you cut them, they will bleed like any one of us. And if you accuse them falsely, they will hurt like any one of us. Sir, I have never been one to suspect that when a fishing boat unloads in Oistins or at Skeets Bay up by me or in the Bridgetown complex or wherever, that there are guns hidden under the fish or somewhere else in the boat. I have never, sir, for one moment suspected that. I know that those men go out to sea, sir, and they do that to provide for their families. I know that much about them. And they do that by fishing and fishing and fishing hard. Fishing is hard work. And when you work so hard and so honestly, and you hear these accusations being made, you can't feel comfortable. It's hard work. The weather that they have to work in, the nights with and the family around them. The families sometimes don't even know what time they're going to get back in or if they're going to get back in at all. And they're out there working. They're not out there obtaining guns from others for distribution in Barbados. And as I said, sir, the fishermen I know and I play with are not pleased with the accusation. I want to say, sir, that such statements should not be made without proof. I wouldn't go as far as Senator Grant has gone already today. I wouldn't go that far. But these statements should not be statements made without proof. We cannot be loose and irresponsible with the statements that we make in this chamber. I ask, and I could ask him through you, sir, whether or not, I want to know what the source of his information is. Did he get it from the Coast Guard? Did he get it from the customs? Did he get it from the police? Did he get it from the policemen themselves? Or is it just a figment of his imagination? What is the source? That is the question that I'm asking. I want Senator Franklin to realize he wants to answer that his feelings are not facts. I want him to realize that his feelings are not facts. And these men who brave the dangers of the sea will obviously be hurt by such an accusation. So let us not seek to heap blame on our fishermen. I think, sir, that this is a very serious allegation. Very, very serious allegation. I think you are actually accusing a certain group, the fishermen, of committing what is indeed a criminal act. You are accusing the fishermen of a criminal act. Why the fishing boats? Why not pleasure boats? Why not people under the guise of fishermen? Why not yachts? Why our poor fishermen? Why our poor fishermen? No, sir. I want to say, sir, that those responsible for our border security, whether it be the police, the customs, the Coast Guard, or whoever, they can make their presence felt at some of the places that the boats land, if they have any inkling whatsoever that this accusation, that there's any truth in this accusation. Wherever they know the boat's coming, make some frequent appearances there. As a rule, checks are not really made on the fishing boats. But if they think that for one moment that any of them are involved in this kind of activity, then by all means do whatever is necessary to curb it. The fishermen have told me that they are sure that 99% of our Barbadian fishermen who operate ice boats and the ordinary fishing boats, that they are as clean as a whistle. 99% they say, are as clean as a whistle. So if we do that occasional random search, then even that 1% would refrain from doing it. And that no one would ever be able in a position to say, fishermen do this again. So we need some random searches if that will put some people's mind at ease on the beaches where the boats land in this side. So, Mr. President, that is all I really wanted to say, because I wanted to let the fishermen know that at least there's one old man in this Senate who has their interests at heart. I'm obliged, sir.
Senator Adams.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this chance to make a small contribution on the Customs Amendment and the Anti-Terrorism Amendment bills. I want to echo some of the things that other senators have said so far, particularly in terms of why it is important that we have this kind of legislation enhance what's already on the books. And we've spoken about things like the Cubana tragedy, but we've tended to focus exclusively on the final result of the planning of some of these acts. And I'm talking particularly about anti-terrorism financing. So Cubana we kind of recognize as close to home. It happened off our shores, 1976. I remember that very well indeed. And all the allegations that followed it in terms of, I think it's Freddie Lugo was the guy, you probably know better than me, Senator Franklin, linked to George Bush's CIA and so on and so forth. A lot of lurid allegations. But that aside, sometimes it is difficult to connect the reasons this kind of legislation is important to a small island like Barbados. It's a little bit more than we have no choice, we have to do it, in my view. A reputational argument is important. It is true that it would be foolish not to do it because we would be hurting our own commercial interests, without a doubt. But what makes me start off that way, and the way I'm going to expand this, was an obituary I read, I think it was last week, and it was of a man, Mr. President, you're probably very familiar with him. It's Robert Morgenthau, who was the district attorney in Manhattan for about 34 years. He died, he was 99. He had a really long and strong history of prosecuting all kinds of malfeasance, be it drug-connected, mafioso, public corruption, what have you, in his tenure in New York. He had a 75% success rate, I think, in prosecuting these cases. But the one that stands out for me when I was reading it was one he spent years preparing before it could actually be brought to prosecution, and it was related to the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI. One of the reasons he was so proud of that particular prosecution is this was a huge international banking organization spread across 78 countries, something like $20 billion of assets on its books. And when it collapsed, 1991, almost a little more than 28 years to the day, it was July 1991, what unfolded afterwards put the Cubana episode almost to shame. It turned out that the BCCI had one way or another helped those in the drug smuggling industry, like the Medellin cartel. It had helped dictators like Saddam Hussein and Marcos Noriega, Samuel Doe, and a few others. It had helped even the CIA, it is alleged, had accounts there that helped with their Iran-Contra shenanigans. And perhaps most notably, it had helped Abu Nidal, which was a well-known terrorist organization at the time. And it had helped these people because it had taken advantage of a lack of centralized coordination, regulatory scrutiny that existed at that time internationally. It was very hard for banking supervisors in different countries to really focus on what they were doing at BCCI. And that rogues gallery that I just described were able to take loans from perhaps unwitting depositors and finance their activities. Now, the reason that is important to Barbados, of course, is because one of those 78 jurisdictions in which they had a branch was in Barbados, and it collapsed. And to my mind, this was more important than CLICO, although fewer people were affected in this country, certainly more important than trade confirmers. Because I don't think anybody who made a deposit locally in BCCI imagined for 1 second that they were somehow connected to the likes of Saddam Hussein or the CIA, Iran-Contra, and what have you, so on down the line. So it is a fact, as Senator Franklin said, we do have to do it. I think we do have to do it. But the context is larger than that. Do we want unwittingly to be part of any sort of financial system that would permit a repeat of these kinds of episodes? No. I think the answer is no. The reputational risk is large. It just so happened because we were one of 78 jurisdictions, the reputational fallout for us wasn't great. I mean, there's a saying, if you're going to fail in a lot of company. So if you're one of 78, you're probably not going to carry a huge can. But if you make a mistake, the reputational risk is huge. But I think above and beyond that, there is our temporal interest, if I can put it that way, related to commercial activity that we have to comply, and this is a form of compliance. And then there's what I'd say the spiritual interest. You do not want to be a party to these kinds of episodes. And as far as it is possible to strengthen and buttress the existing legislation that is on the books, we must do it, partly to avoid the final result of terrorist outrages, be it Cubana or 9/11 or what have you, but to stymie the logistical planning that goes into those, and to make sure that it is not so easy to launder funds, to misdirect funds for nefarious aims. I think Mr. President, if I was to conclude, because I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, I agree with Senator Franklin that it's really not contentious. The final point is that, like all legislation, I think it's a living document. You know, people will find a way around whatever is put on the books, and we must never be complacent and think that the job is done. This is a dynamic situation. Financiers are clever; they find ways to launder money, and they find ways to misdirect it. It's a constant cat and mouse, or as the Americans say, a whack-a-mole game. And with those few words, Mr. President, thank you.
Senator Moore, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like the other senator colleagues, I must express that there's not much or there's not anything really within the amendments being proposed on the Customs Amendment Bill 2 and the Anti-Terrorism Bill before us that ought to be opposed. Terrorism continues to pose a major threat to our peace and our security, and terrorism must not be observed only in terms of the international level of terrorism. When once upon a time we heard about terrorism, it was easy to perceive it as something that would not come close to us, something far off, something that will impact the World Trade Center. And that is going back to 9/11 and so on, when the first real or major terrorist threats in recent history were being recorded. But every month almost we are hearing, although it is international news still, it is coming closer to home as we hear threats that are being observed in places that all of us frequent, or many of you frequent as you travel, places like Walmart. And you start to contemplate that any of us on our travels could be in a mall space like that, minding our own business, and become a victim, or even if not a victim, come in close contact with acts of terror. Then we hear of terrorist acts being manifest in churches where people are just going to worship whatever religion they observe. They're going to have a time of worship, yet even there, the church that is supposed to be a safe space is no longer a safe space. So, Mr. President, it goes without saying that terrorism and terrorist acts are things that we have to concern ourselves with, especially when one considers that Barbados is a tourism destination. And it means that we are welcoming and encouraging people to our shores, and we don't know what they are capable of bringing to our shores. Internationally, terrorism undermines the UN Charter of respect for human rights, respect for people's lives, respect for the rule of law, tolerance amongst people, and peaceful resolution of conflict. All of these tenets undermined in the United Nations Charter are things that we ought to be concerned about as citizens as we go about our everyday lives. So it would be unfortunate for any of us to believe that terrorist acts are not close enough to Barbados, that beyond the concerns for international trade, we shouldn't be concerned about in the way that they could impact our day-to-day living. Addressing the threat of terrorism, addressing the threats of violence is a very complex process, especially when one considers the evolving nature of terrorist activity. As I mentioned, the Walmart and the churches situation. The Customs Amendment Bill, like the Anti-Terrorism Bill, are justifiable efforts on the part of government to suppress fraud and money laundering and financing of terrorism and bring some order and accountability to the way that we do business. But this complex problem requires a very comprehensive, multidimensional approach to fixing a problem so that measures aren't seen as merely plaster on sores, is the way that I would put it in my limited capacity. We must address the issues that create environments conducive to breaches, environments conducive to acts of terrorism and violence. And in speaking of these environments, I think of corruption. I think of poverty. Poverty, a situation where people find themselves living in houses very cluttered, where you can find generations living in one-bedroom or two-bedroom units. Some of them, we are hearing of the prevalence, the large number of pit toilet experiences that there still are in this 166 square miles in 2019. We think of environments conducive to violent behaviors, because terrorism and violence are synonymous only to the extent that violence is a part of terrorism, but terrorism is not necessarily violence because it's a more extreme or regarded as a more extreme form. Conditions that give rise to violent behavior or terrorist behavior, we think of lack of accountability. So beyond the capacity to fight terror, which the Customs Amendment Bill and the Anti-Terrorism Bill, or the capacity to fight terror and money laundering and so on, which these bills are seeking to address, are important, yes, but what are more important, or let me correct myself to say equally important, should be the will to fight terror. And that will can't only be the will of government to fight terror. It must be the will of every citizen in this country to fight something that we regard as threatening our own lives, our livelihoods, and this country's stability. So I think that when Senator Franklin, for instance, was speaking about customs, it is not necessarily just to draw in on territory as if he's the only voice for customs officers, but it was really to draw example to amendments that are being made to address a particular area, customs, without giving expression to the concerns of the very officers that will have to deliver in many respects on the changes that we are seeking to institute. So I will not attempt to rehash it, except to say that one of the aspects that has not been mentioned and which needs to be articulated within the relevance to the discussions here would be the fact that we are introducing amendments to a department that is significantly understaffed. And if we are to bring effect to a lot of the changes that are being contemplated, then the question of staffing must not be ignored. Yes, there have been many commitments being made to address this very niggling issue, but we have a situation where customs officers are not getting off days, where systems that are in place, systems which are known to all customs officers, may appear to be ignored and not at will, but because there's no choice in a situation where you don't have sufficient manpower to ensure that the systems in place are being sufficiently executed. But that is when we treat to particular job areas, and customs will not be the only one that we will have concern with when we speak about protecting our borders, is conditions in the port more widely, or the ports more widely, that would occupy our attention. But when we speak about developing within citizens the will to fight terror and money laundering and these conditions that create the kind of havoc on our society that we've been hearing about, I must compliment the government too for the thrust to correct the pig toilet situation, to introduce an initiative, the National Training Initiative, that will target citizens' development and training across all levels of the country. And the recent things that we're hearing coming out of the Ministry of Education about the efforts to make sure that all schools become centers of excellence so that students more widely can feel a sense of pride that up until now only a few in our society may think that they can feel because they can identify with people that may share their alma mater, or people that have gone to school where they are currently going to school. But on the question of will, I don't want anybody to think that in my contribution, I'm attempting to undermine the efforts to improve the capacity to fight what we are about. But I am emphasizing the will because a strategy that is broad and multidimensional must observe that we must dissuade people. We must reverse the causes of violence, including through employment. Barbados has gone through a very rough period. Some, even in this chamber, Mr. President, like to speak about a lost decade. But even now, in 2019, too many of our people are finding it more difficult than they ought to be finding it. And it's not only on account of a retrenchment program in the public service, or it's not only on account of retrenchment that is being experienced in the private sector, but it is the fact that even if there are retrenchments that may be deemed necessary in some areas, if there isn't the commensurate environment where we can be creating jobs at a sufficient pace so that idleness and unemployment and frustration and everything else doesn't become the norm, then we are creating environments that are conducive to the very things that we are exercising our capacity to correct. So it's not only the question of unemployment, but even where people are in employment, you want to ensure that the rights, the social and human rights of individuals meet the standard that would counter the environments that I'm referring to that will be conducive to terrorist acts. We must address the major political grievances that are still in the minds of many Barbadians. And specifically, I refer to penalties being handed down to those who have engaged in political crimes. Now, the current administration is under heavy attack, and justifiably so, because in its campaign leading up to elections, there was much ado being made for correcting criminal behavior when that behavior has taken place in very high places. And now, in over a year, in over 14 months after coming to power, the citizen, the average citizen who has had to pay, who has had to suffer, who is continuing to suffer on, cannot see what we have been speaking about, cannot see that we are practicing what we are preaching. So we are exercising capacity. Yes, we are putting in place the laws, everything good, and so on. But people who are accountable for the situation that the average person who is suffering is in, we can see nothing being done to address the political grievance that a country demonstrated was a collective grievance on May the 24th, when 30 seats went in one direction. So I'm speaking, and I'm reminding Mr. President, this honorable chamber, that I'm speaking about inculcating within each citizen the will to combat what we know we have the capacity to enforce. Stopping a state from collapsing, stopping a country from collapsing economically and socially weighs heavily on our ability to be able to achieve in these other areas. I agree that we must promote and develop the use of better instruments. Barbados has lagged behind in a number of respects. When we were discussing Customs Amendment Bill number 3, we highlighted one of those when we spoke about the scanning. We not only spoke about the scanning, but we spoke about the advanced passenger information and so on. And there are a number of other positive measures that are being introduced to facilitate the legal framework that we are seeking to have implemented. Things like truth verification, testing, and so on. There's nobody that in principle will deny the value that such measures will hold. Things like we have companies that would want to seek to introduce breathalyzer tests and so on. All of these may be possible, and well, not possible, but positive measures to bring more accountability and effectiveness to the system. But if we must promote and develop better use of instruments, and if we must introduce them in a way that people don't feel that their civil rights and liberties are being undermined, then we must first establish the appropriate legal frameworks to do so, or recognize that we cannot enforce these things on people, citizens, whether in the workplace or outside of the workplace. I know that my Senate colleague, Senator Cummins, will understand very well where I'm coming from in this regard. We must not find ourselves accused of doing the right thing, but going about the right thing in the wrong way. Something that I've heard myself saying in this honorable chamber at least 3 times when I've had the occasion to speak. So I just want to support the bills before us, but I just hope that the message of encouraging the average citizen of seeing the part that he or she can play in implementing the changes that we are discussing at this level. Each citizen must be able to see that I have a part to play in this. I have a part to play in assisting and identifying people. But where individuals recognize that there is an imposition being made on them, or that the conditions to improve their lot, whether in the household, through employment, in the workplace, through the conditions that we've heard alluded to and so on, if these are not also being addressed, we may find ourselves doing exactly what I said a minute ago, doing the right thing, but not being able to achieve the right result because we have not gone about the right thing in the right way. So with these words, I just want to support the bills, and I hope that the message that has been made reaches the ears that need to hear it, but beyond that, that we can see it being rolled out in positive action that will deliver the changes that we are discussing here today. I thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Moore?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank certainly all of the senators who participate in this debate. As I said at the onset of it, this is an important measure that we need to be proactive on. And so I hope that the honorable senators present will support this amendment. As I articulated in earlier, and I'll just quickly highlight some of the necessary parts of the bill that make it are extremely important to our country. First, it allows us to comply, as I said earlier, with many of our obligations, certainly within the area of the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, where our compliance is necessary. Okay, it has long-reaching effects on our overall management of the affairs of this country financially, and to ensure that Barbados, not only is it compliant, but the level of integrity of our systems is there, and that everyone can see that we are serious about what we are going to do in this area. Secondly, it allows us to be compliant with any sanctions on terrorism and terrorism financing, certainly in relation to our commitment to United Nations, the Security Council. And this is important because it's important that Barbados' reputation and our well-known, and that's well known that Barbados is a jurisdiction that certainly is held in high regard in terms of safety and security, not just as a country, but for that of our citizens. Now, I will not go over and rehash all of the many terrorist activities that have affected us as a country over the years, whether here off of our shores or internationally, where some of our citizens may have been present when it has occurred. But just to say that I did listen to my fellow senator here, Senator Moore, and she did make an extremely important point, and that is that every citizen has its part to play. Every citizen has its part to play. As I said earlier, terrorism has no race, it has no ethnicity, it has no socioeconomic condition, it has no religion. Terrorist activities are committed by all types of people. And I gave an example where I showed that the incident occurred here off the shores of our country many years ago, back in 1976, was not committed by Muslims, but by Christians. So we know this. And in the same way that we are cognizant that many different types of people are engaged in this type of activity, it is also the responsibility of every Barbadian to play their part in ensuring that this jurisdiction continues to be as safe and secure for us, our children, and our grandchildren, and other generations to come. And Mr. President, with those few words, I would like to beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the bill under consideration be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. I do now leave the chair.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do now leave the chamber and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We are now in committee. Over to you.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1.
I beg to move that clause 1 stand part.
The question is that clause 1 stand part. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
I beg to move that clause 2 stand part.
The question is that clause 2 stand part. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
I beg to move that clause 3 stand part.
The question is that clause 3 stand part. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
I beg to move that clause 4 stand part.
The question is that clause 4 stand part. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
I beg to move that clause 5 stand part.
The question is that clause 5 stand part. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of 1 bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the President the passing of 1 bill in committee. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now be read a third time.
Question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited. And be cited. And be cited as
Order.
the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Act 2019.
Question is,
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mr. President, and to move that the Customs Amendment Number 2 Act 2019 and the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Act 2019.
One at a time, one at a time. Do the customs first.
This Customs Amendment Number 2 Act 2019.
question is that the bill under consideration be now passed and be so cited. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The bill is now being passed and will be cited. Be so cited, I don't have the right language before me, but it's just been given.
Order number 2, sir. In the name of the acting leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2019.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the public service
No. The anti-terrorism.
or the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Act 2019, Bill 2019, be read a second time.
Question is that the bill just mentioned be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Leave the chair.
Question is, I don't know, leave the chair.
Leave the chair. Yeah, it's two separate things.
I beg to now move that His Honor leave the chair and that the House
Senate.
resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the bill under debate in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it, and the Senate is now in committee. Over to you, Cabby.
The Senate is now in committee.
Madam Chair, may I take the bill in parts?
In parts rather than section by section.
Yes.
Permission granted.
Clauses 1 to 6.
I beg to move that clauses 1 to 6 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 to 6 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 7 to 12.
I beg to move that clauses 7 to 12 stand part.
The question is that clauses 7 to 12 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The first schedule.
I beg to move that the first schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule be the schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Second schedule.
I beg to move the second schedule be the schedule to the bill.
Second schedule to the bill. The question is that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Report the pass.
I beg to move that you now report His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Mr. Chairman.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill under consideration in committee.
I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Passed and decided as.
I beg to move that this now be cited, this bill now be, do now pass and be cited the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Act 2019.
Question is that the bill do now pass and be so cited. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I need to indicate that this measure needs a 2/3 majority. Please take control, Mr.
Senator Walcott,
Aye.
Senator Moore,
Aye.
Senator McConney,
Aye.
Senator Dr. Springer,
Aye.
Senator Grant,
Aye.
Senator Holder,
Aye.
Senator Cummins,
Aye.
Senator Haynes,
Aye.
Senator Sands, Senator Adams, Senator Franklin,
Aye.
Senator Drake,
Aye.
Senator Rogers,
Aye.
Senator Wiggins,
Aye.
Senator Moore,
Aye.
Senator Tate,
Aye.
Senator Nurse,
Aye.
Your Honor, Senator Greenwich.
Aye.
Mr. President, 18 honorable senators voted in favor of the motion. Therefore, in accordance with Section 49 of the Constitution, the threshold of the two-thirds majority has been reached.
18 voted for, threshold has been reached. None voted against. I'm to advise that following the count that's made of each individual member by the clerk, remember that this measure needs a two-thirds majority. 18 honorable members voted in favor. And none against.
What's the next one there? Which one is?
In the name of the honored acting leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Public Service Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2019.
What measure is this?
Is it called there? 4 and 5? You got your order paper?
Excuse me.
Got it. Four. Second public service. Second bill. The other one is.
Okay. So we're going to go back to that.
For the public service miscellaneous provisions bill, along with the administrative justice amendment bill. I want to comment the bill.
Let them know you propose street and board.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would like to move that these two bills, the Public Service Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2019 and the Administrative Justice Amendment Bill 2019, be treated as a cognate debate. These two bills are very much interrelated, Mr. President. Much of what is contained within them certainly are somewhat synonymous in many parts of it. And so I think it'd be more instructive for us to do it as a cognate debate, Mr. President.
The question? The question is that the two bills just mentioned be read together as a cognate debate. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. You're free to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Administrative Justice Amendment Bill 2019 and the Public Service Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2019 both are to assist us in providing specific methodologies related to changes within the structure of the public service. Now, these bills, when amended, will amend certain enactments relating to the public service. And these are really consequential amendments based on other amendments that have been done previously. You'll recall, Mr. President, that back earlier this year, I think it was April 2019, this year, that the Constitutional Amendment Number 2 Act provided for the creation of 2 new service commissions, the Administrative, General and Professional Service Commission, which replaced the Public Service Commission, and the Protective Service Commission, which placed the Public Service Commission, and the Protective Service Commission, which had jurisdiction over the police force, fire service, prison service, immigration department, and the customs department. And we will also remember that there were changes. So in light of these changes, it's proposed that the relevant amendments be made to subsidiary legislation and orders which make reference to these public service areas. These amendments also included the provision for the creation of the post of the Director General, Human Resources, where human resources and other related duties and responsibility fell under that office. So basically, Mr. President, these amendments, because of previous amendments, will now address other issues that would make some of the procedural aspects fall better into place. Now, one will recall that our public service has stood us in good stead over the years. I don't think there's anyone that really has worked or been around the public service that will not concur that the public service today, Barbados has a very good public service and always has. The public service and the workers within this sector, for the main part, have been at the forefront of the development of our country. That goes without saying. I don't think there's a single area within the public service that one cannot see that. But these particular, and I call some of them the protective services, the police and immigration and fire and these services, these are important services to our country. Now, everyone in here, Mr. President, will know that public service of Barbados has been around longer than anyone in this chamber has been around. And it has been longer than anyone in here has been around. This public service was developed using a British model in a bygone era. This is the 21st century. This would have been done in the 20th century. In the 20th century, the British, using the model of the day, developed a public service that we used, and the models and the methodologies were certainly given to us by them. And they were wonderful, and some aspects of them are still wonderful. But like anything else in life, things change. The world has changed. Now, what was there in the 20th century? For us that have been around a long time, like myself and Senator Franklin, I think he's my age, Mr. President. I think Senator Franklin and I've known him for a very long time. So I think if he's not my age, he's very close to my age. And he would have come up with me in the days of carburetor engines. But people don't have carburetor engines now, Mr. President, unless the vehicle is like an antique or some car that one has, some sort of fondness for. Because nowadays cars are fuel injected. Before that they had cars that used to crank. You had to go in front of the car and turn and crank it up. And that's about the same time that you had the public service. The crank cars. You go in front of your turn, and thank you, Senator Franklin. We have a friend that has one. You go and turn it, and that starts up the car. No, there were wonderful inventions in their time, and they stood us in good stead. That they really did. But just like anything else, the world has changed, and so therefore the modes, the methodologies, the way in which we run a country, the way in which people work, the conditions under which they work, sometimes those too have to change. There's no doubt about it. None whatsoever. I remember as a young person, when I first started my first little job working, they didn't have computers. They didn't have computers. They had a typewriter. My very first job I ever went and worked in, I was a shipping clerk. In those days, they had these two companies, Hapag-Lloyd and Harrison Lines, and you went in and you typed up all these shipping manifests on a typewriter. Now, I cannot remember, Mr. President, the last day that I've seen a typewriter. I don't know, some people probably have them, but as like an antique, so you put in a museum. No one here is using a typewriter. Everyone here is using either a computer or an iPad or a tablet or some of that. They're hardly even using paper now. So, yes, we have had some very good regulations governing the public sector, and no one could have quarreled with those regulations at the time. But like anything else, you have to sometimes make changes for efficiency. You have to make changes in order for you to be able to work within a modern framework, especially a framework where technology oftentimes plays a part in what you have to do. And there's no doubt in anyone's mind that we are now in a technology age. I think it's difficult to go anywhere now sometimes and not have a difficulty if you don't understand the technology. I will not call the name of the bank, but there's a bank that I use, bank at, and you cannot go in that bank properly and transact your business if you don't understand the technology. You need to be able to use a debit card so you're not charged a fee for going to the counter. If you go to the counter, you have to pay a fee. So therefore, for most people, they learn how to use a debit card so they don't have to go in the bank and have to then engage in transactions that may incur cost. Same thing within the public sector. The public sector is moving more and more into a technology area, into a technology framework. And so oftentimes when you're doing this, it is more efficient to bring certain things together under one umbrella. And that having been done, it makes it easier then to administer and to be able to reasonably allow them to execute some of their duties in a manner that is fitting for the 21st century and not the 20th century. I remember sitting in here and a senator told me that at one time he used to work in immigration. I remember he clearly told me so. And I remember asking him, what year was that? Because this senator has worked in many different areas. Many. No, he's never been a fisherman. As a matter of fact, he made comments, and so I heard today, that I think some of the fishermen would not be too perhaps pleased about. And I will say I agree with the sentiments of the Honourable Senator Greenwich, because I come from a fishing community, and I can vouch for fishermen in Barbados, and I can say that I know that they have some wonderful people in the fishing industry. But I digress, and I will not be distracted. My grandmother is from Paynes Bay, St. James, and I know all Barbadians who know fishing communities know Paynes Bay, St. James. Learn to swim right in that sea, right across. But I digress, Mr. President. I will no longer be distracted. The reality is that I remember the senator in question told me, Mr. President, that he worked in immigration. I asked what year. It was sometime in the very, very early 1980s. But funny enough, Mr. President, during that time, they didn't have any computers. So the methodology that immigration would have used in order to transact a lot of their business would have been done by hand and not using computers, you know, as you do today. But we've gone even past computers now. We've gone even past your basic computer, your laptop or your desktop or whatever, and we're now asking people when they come through our ports of entry to use a kiosk. And this is a new thing. So therefore, yes, it has its little problems and glitches, like anything that's new. I remember watching people like myself who learned to drive on a manual, a stick shift. So much so that when I had to go and drive automatic, because you're so used to changing gears, you automatically rest your hand on the gear shift. Not you move it, but just an automatic behavior, because you learn to drive a car by moving the gears. And oftentimes when you get in a car with someone, you can even tell sometimes because of all the years they would be driving a manual. Same thing with immigration. Unlike when my colleague, Senator, was working in immigration where there's no computers, now we're talking about kiosks, because technology is what speeds up many of our processes, and it speeds up many of what happens within the government sector. And it's no different, Mr. President, with this legislation. This legislation brings together, or our previous legislation, I should say, has brought together many of these services, provide departments within the public sector together under one umbrella. And this now is as I said, consequential amendments in order to ensure that the efficiency and the viability, the ability for administration, I mean, write down the simple things like human resource management, things as simple as that, are more productive, that those things are more, and I don't mean to be redundant, but certainly more efficient, and that people have a better benefit from it, and allows a much more transparent and far fairer administration of these entities than what would have obtained previously, when we would have been in a different era. Now, I know that there are some people that will say, as you always get with anything, Mr. President, why the changes? I think I've explained clearly why things in life change. And most of the time, even sometimes where there are criticisms, in retrospect, people then recognize as something is implemented and people get used to what is occurring, that the changes are actually beneficial. And not only beneficial to the individuals who they affect, but they're beneficial to the society at large. And that society is, in this case, what? Barbados. Now, one of the areas under which this bill does have some adjustments will be, as I said, the area of human resource management and the policies. And many things are affected under it. Things like recruitment, selection, placement, transfer of personnel, appointments, promotion, discipline, retirement of personnel, training and development. You know, we oftentimes forget that that many of these areas need training and development. I think that Barbados has been very good in that area within the public service. Many public servants have benefited from training and development, and they will continue to do so. Every week, if you're in the public service, you see the notices. Years ago, the notices, we'd only see them stuck up somewhere, or you see them in the official gazette. which before was just a piece of paper, Mr. President. The official gazette was something you had to walk around with in your hand, flicking through to try to see. Now, the official gazette, you can go online and see it because it's more immediate. So you can go online and see it. So it is available to many more people. And of course, with the computerization of the public service, notices are sent out via email every week. So all the people in public service can see what training opportunities are available, what development opportunities are available for them. And of course, they have the right sometimes to nominate people for some of these endeavors. So that is one aspect as well that would certainly be streamlined within this scenario. And it ensures that every ministry or department implements the appropriate human resource systems to adequately manage the department or the ministry. And so these are some of, I won't go through all the things, but these are the highlights and the salient aspects of what is included within these adjustments. Now, Mr. President, having had a whole year and some months now to work within the public sector, I can safely say that the majority of people that I've had to work with in so many different parts of government, many different ministries, departments, some statutory organizations, they're very good at what they do, and they should be commended. They should be commended. Public officers oftentimes are unnecessarily vilified because one or two people, like anything else in life, you may always have one or two that may not quite meet the standard. But the majority of them go above and beyond what they need to do. They work long hours, as oftentimes for little recognition. We always run and we get them to do things for us, and sometimes we forget to say thank you. We forget to say you've done a great job. We forget to sort of understand some of the difficulties they sometimes have in trying environments where government sometimes does not always have the necessary resources in order to make their job easier. And because the resources are not there, they may sometimes have some difficulties and struggle a little bit with implementation, Mr. President. But nevertheless, they don't complain and they get the job done. They get the job done. And I want to say that certainly these particular areas that are affected are some of the most important areas in our country. The teaching service. Without teachers, I don't think any of us would be in here. Teachers in this country. Oh, Mr. President, I'm sorry. It appears the senator that was a previous immigration officer also was a teacher. Wow. I think it's probably about the 6th or 7th. Yeah, Jack. Thank you, Mr. President. I couldn't remember the word, jack of all trades. Yeah. But the teaching service and the teachers must be commended. Must be commended because we have been to these, seen the conditions sometimes under which people are teaching, and I think that they do an extremely good job. The other area, of course, is the police force. Now, I sometimes hear people saying things about the police force, and I really am sometimes a little surprised. You know, the police force in any other area, you have great people, good people, and you have people that may not quite make the grade, but that's true in every aspect of life. But the police force in Barbados is one of the best police forces that I have seen, and I've worked in many countries. Furthermore, Mr. President, I can say without fear of contradiction that in many of the Caribbean countries I've worked in, and there are at least 8 or 9 of them that I've worked in over the last 7 to 10 years, There is no more desired individual to come and work in these police forces than Barbadians.
That's true.
You go Cayman, Bajans. You go St. Lucia, Bajans. You go BVI, Bajans. You go Bermuda, Bajans. You go Bahamas, Bajans. You go Antigua, Bajans. Everywhere is Bajan, Bajan, Bajans. Bajan policemen are desired throughout the Caribbean. And even the ones that I don't know, they don't have to tell me they're Bajan. When I go, they tell me they're policemen, they tell me the name is Cumberbatch, I know they're Bajan. You know? So the police force here, and I will say this for me, and I think for most people in here, they should always be commended. And even the ones, which is so funny, even people who sometimes are critical of them, the minute they have a problem, the first person they run and call is the police. Yeah. So, of course, the prison service, that goes without saying. As much as we would love to not have people in prison, and we would love to have as few people in prison, this is a necessary and important aspect of our society. And they too do an extremely good job. The fire service goes without saying. We all know what the fire service does. Forensic scientists, customs officers, immigration officers, security guards, and all the protective service commissions. These people are at the forefront of our security, of our protection, of all the things within our society that allow us to live peaceful lives, to live lives with as little interference, with as little issues and problems as anyone would want. So, Mr. President, these amendments, to these two particular acts, these two bills that are present to us here today, are important because it really allows us to continue to move Barbados and these aspects of the public service of Barbados into a modern framework, into a framework of better administration, into a framework of better accountability, into a framework that allows for enactment in a manner that is more relevant to the 21st century. And so, bearing these things in mind, Mr. President, I would like to now move that this bill now be read a second time.
I recognize Senator Franklin, the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I was treated to some things I didn't know. I found out today, sir, that Senator Moore learned to drive on a horseless carriage. But these are things that, I thought people would keep back from us. So today, I want to speak on these two bills, but mainly the Public Service Miscellaneous Provisions Bill. But I find myself in a position, sir, where I'm a bit in an uncomfortable position because I heard the minister who led the debate in the other place. He flayed some senior public officers and the way they treat their staff and they treat the people below them. Under normal circumstances, sir, I would have taken a turn in him. But a newspaper reporter called me to get my comments on what the minister said. And I said, I complimented him. He understands the public service, how it behaves. And I said, but at least there's one person in the cabinet that is not fooled by some of these senior public officers. Minister Jordan seems, if I didn't know better, I would think that he was an old civil servant. He knew exactly what was happening in the public service. And that is why I have a difficulty, because the cabinet knows how bad this public service senior people behave. And because he knows, he spelled it out. I complimented him on his speech. I actually sought him out and complimented him on his presentation. There was one aspect of his speech that I didn't agree with. I didn't agree with everything he said, and that was dealing with the area of the Director General. I'll get to that. But I almost agreed wholeheartedly with everything else that he said. We have some senior civil servants who think it is their duty to terrorize the people below them. They make it almost, people get sick, cry at work because of something that some of these senior people do to them, you know. I feel like they believe that they must have come to work, and if they do not terrorize somebody, they did not do a good day's work. And so I compliment the minister. I tell you, when you people do good things, I will speak to it, and I will agree. The minister was spot on. But it gives me no pleasure to say so, because those are things that sound like what he is talking about is the slavish mentality. The people who were given the whips to beat, they had slave drivers. They still have that mentality. They believe that they must terrorize staff, penalize them, do not let them do a good day's work because people are afraid what will happen to them. And it is not in one department, it is throughout the public service. Sir, this bill, sir, is intended to be consequential amendments on the arising out of the Constitution Amendment number 2 bill, number 2 Act of 2019. Of course, it must be done because what has happened here, we didn't need to do these amendments if people behave honorably. We had services commissions who forgot their role. They believed that their role was to support the political party that put them in place. Under normal circumstances, if the government had moved these amendments at the Constitution, I would have opposed them vigorously. But what I saw going on in the public service, government had to do something. Government had to do something. Don't fool yourself, sir. The government was forced to do something. I don't know if I would have done it this way. Maybe I would have brought charges against the people on the commission and removed them from office because their behavior merited such. But the government took the easy path and amended the Constitution and got rid of them. It reminds me, it was a thing I saw in a movie once where in the Old West, if a person committed a murder and hid the body, you couldn't hang him for murder. But when you go out in the desert and you kill a fella and you ride on his horse, horse thieving was a capital offense. So you didn't get him for murder, but you get him for horse thieving. Nonetheless, so the government got these commissions for horse thieving, basically. They had to do something about them. They believed that their duty was, even if the new government was in place, that they had to block them. They had to block their agenda. They didn't conform, and they did not act impartially. They were trying to stack the public service with all their former supporters, so that when they will make sure that this government does not achieve its goals. So the government amended the Constitution to get rid of them. Well, I was not happy that it did it, but look, this bill is not only about those consequential amendments, it is also an insidious power grab to concentrate the power in the public service in the hands of one woman. That person who now occupies the illegal post of Director General, because there's no such thing, because no Director General came here, because in order to create posts in the public service, the minister under the Section 14 Public Service Act creates posts. But when you create posts, they're subject to affirmative resolution. never came here. So that is why we have also in this bill a validation clause to say that all the wrongdoings that they did since this Director General came into place will be now legitimized. I believe, sir, that this person who did more harm in the public service than any Category 5-star would have done in respect of people's careers, now have the power concentrated in her hands of two former posts, the Chief Personnel Officer and the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Civil Service. If you were at a situation where the Personnel Administration Division did something that you don't particularly like, especially if it comes to deal with qualifications or something like that, you would appeal to the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Civil Service, who would then do the research and inform the minister, well, this person is still qualified to be appointed. And then they would turn and tell the Personnel Administration Division, headed by the CPO, oh, this person is qualified, this person can get the job. But no, you have a situation where if you do that, you're going to appeal from Director General to Director General. Something is wrong with that. I suspect that the Minister of the Public Service, who is the Prime Minister, was misled into doing this. She did it the wrong way. I suspect that the Minister, having been misled, now going to continue with this behavior. Look, in order to have a post in the public service, as I said, the minister creates posts. She can create a temporary post for 3 years, and then after another 3 years, you can renew it for a further 3 years, but no more. I sat here in this chamber when we were meeting with the Prime Minister and the unions, and I heard, as a matter of fact, I spoke to the Prime Minister when the debate on the Constitutional Amendment number 2 bill was going on, and I said to her, Prime Minister, you know that after tomorrow, because the Senate would have been meeting the following day, which it was a Tuesday we were here, after tomorrow, clerical officers, according to this Constitutional Amendment, would not be able to perform the functions and customs anymore. After I explained to the Prime Minister said, can we get this thing done today? Because customs would have ground to a halt if something didn't happen. And the Prime Minister moved swiftly. And I complimented her on it to get it done. But the implementation by the persons involved deceived all of us that are around the table, because the Prime Minister agreed, and I never heard the Prime Minister mention temporary posts, I certainly didn't mention the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister agreed with what I was saying. Senator Moore was there. You can ask her if the Prime Minister once mentioned anything about temporary posts. No, never. But these people who continue to deceive the Prime Minister and underperform, but underperform is just higher standard, who continue to deceive the Prime Minister. I don't know if we might as well get rid of them, because there's a clause, there's a provision in the Code of Conduct and Ethics, paragraph 5C, which makes it an offense that you can be dismissed from the public service for misleading the minister, Prime Minister, Cabinet, or whoever. It's a clause. Use it, because these people mean this country no good. All they're interested is in themselves and their careers, and they deceive people. You imagine right now, all of those customs officers, the clerical officer posts in the customs are no longer relevant. They're no longer valid. They cannot do customs work. You would only need people in the registry, or accounts. Everybody else was supposed to be designated customs officer 3 or 4. 4 if you had less than 7 years service, and 3 which will be at the senior clerk level, if you have more than 7 years service. That is what the Prime Minister agreed to. But the implementation, the people who do the implementation, created temporary posts and put all 100 and some odd officers in temporary posts and then tell them that they're in these posts until sometime in 2020. No, the jobs are necessary, they are available, they are required. And you're telling me that you're going to put them in there. But you know why? These people who like to terrorize the civil service, who like to terrorize officers, want to have control where you can tell people, look, we're going to send you back somewhere. If a public officer commits an offense, discipline them. But don't keep them temporary and threatened. I know a young lady came to my office crying yesterday because she's been temporary for 13 years. And the deputy PS on Monday telling her, but you know you're still temporary. He's been in service for 47 years and have done nothing but warm chairs for 47 years and threaten people. And this is what they continue to do, aided and abetted by this person who deceived the Prime Minister. I can say this outside because that is what has happened. The Prime Minister is not a civil servant. She don't know much about civil service. She came in and she's a lawyer. She didn't work in the public service, so she takes guidance. And she is misguided on a daily basis by these people. And they got rid of the permanent secretary of Ministry of Civil Service, who would have at least been accountable to the misinformation that the Prime Minister is receiving from this person. It has to stop. This post of Director General is not for the benefit of the public service. It is for the benefit of one person who parades around the place calling himself Director General, deceiving the Prime Minister into this nonsense. Let me do something. Because you could not just get rid of the chief personal officer like that. All the legislation, Public Service Act, general orders, public service regulations, the Service Commission regulations, everything speaks to a chief personal officer. And for the last few months, we didn't have one. Why? And the person who put this to the Prime Minister is aware of that. But it benefited them. So don't tell the Prime Minister the truth. Because, and further yet, if it is a post in the public service, according to the Recruitment and Employment Code, paragraph 2, it's supposed to be advertised. I doubt they tell the Prime Minister that, but Prime Minister knows these things are going to be advertised. According to the law, they advertise everybody else's. But there's just wham, in. No. You put yourself, if you want to change up everything, but do the old way for yourself. No, the one thing you didn't have to advertise the post, you get a report and go, who reported on her? Certainly not me. But this nonsense has to stop. You illegally occupy posts and now asking us here to validate this bad behavior. And they move to disadvantage public officers if you stand up for your rights. I know of several cases where civil servants were mistreated and they had no option but to go to court. That is the worst thing you can do for these people, You go to court. If you go to court, God help you if you win, because you are punished forever. I can give 2 examples. Wismar Gibson from the Law School and Trevor Brown from Dodge Prison. They both put the chief personal officer to court. Both won their cases, 10 years down the road, 10 years after winning your case, you still can't get any justice in this place. In Brown's case, the court said, you got to pay this man for all that, for them to be you disadvantaged this man for all these years. The man said, no, nothing to pay the man. No, this is all a year gone. Because they don't have any regard even for the courts. They do what they like. Wismar Gibson won his case. He was a teacher. I can talk about him. He was a teacher at the law school. Well, he applied for a job, a vacancy, a permanent vacancy, for a permanent job. He was interviewed, and he got the job. He settled in and he started teaching. You know, the paperwork always comes late. So when he did get the paperwork, they assigned him to a temporary job. He said, no, I didn't apply for a temporary job. I applied for the permanent job that was advertised. No, it's both. He applied for a permanent job, and they assigned him to a temporary job. He objected. Mind you, they then turned around and put somebody in the job who did not even apply. Put them in the permanent job. But she went through the chute quickly because she fell in love with one of the youngsters. And then almost brought the school into disrepute, and she had to leave the country. But be that as it may. And you've never heard about that? I'm not telling lies, trust me. The young lady, the silly thing is, there's all this sexual harassment and all kind of stuff. It isn't only directed against the girls, The female teacher held on to this youngster. Anyhow, Mr. Gibson is now out of work for the last 10 years. And you know what's good about it? I provide accommodation for him in my office to do lessons so he can make a living. This year alone, I made a note. There were 26 Barbados scholarships and 36 exhibitions. 5 of the students who qualified for 7 of the people got scholarships were taught in my office by this man. But he can't get a job in the public service because people decide if you offend one head of department, you're goose cook. But no, you get 5 exhibitions too, 7 scholarships and 5 exhibitions, and he can't get a job in the public service because all he did was to stand up to the system and say, look, you unfair me, you ill-treated me. And then the same students now that go to the schools, because half these people who come to my office for lessons are either HC or QC. And you got 1 or 2 others from other schools, Common Mirror, whatever else. He's a damn good teacher. But because he offended somebody, they decide he can't get a job. He goes for interviews at all the schools, about 20 so far. Turn him down. The guy who blew up his children here, he get a job over him too. That man got the job. He went in to play. He didn't give him. He didn't get a job because he is blacklisted. This happens in the public service. Presided by or over by one particular woman who makes sure that when you read the affidavits and she sends before the court, you know that they're untrue. But nothing happens. No judge don't hold her in contempt. The senior people in the public service provide a racket. In 1974, the Right Excellent Honourable tried to break the system away from the lodges because the lodges control the employment in the public service. He decided to take it away and put it in the hands of the government, Prime Minister. And since then, few senior civil servants have been misleading and misdirecting ministers. And they're in control, doing what they like, promoting their friends and family, promoting incompetent people because they're friends, ignoring the rules. Let me tell you something. Under the Recruitment and Employment Code in the public service, there's something called a priority list. This is how it works. If 10 people apply for a job, and let's say there are 4 vacancies, and 10 people apply. The panel that interviews the people make recommendations to the commission. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The other 4 didn't get. So they have a priority list. So the first 4 people get the job. Then the other 2 are on this priority list. Sorry, sir? Yes, the runners-up are on the priority list. The code provides that if a vacancy comes up within 2 years, then there are no interviews, a person automatically goes into the position. You know what this person has been doing? Vacancy, some person applies for a job. They are on the, and they end up being on the priority list. Somebody decide they're going home, the candidate died something. There's a vacancy, the 2 years have not passed. This particular individual decides, oh, we can let the 2 years pass and advertise. No, sir. The decision has already been made by the commission that this person will go up. Number 1 will go up, on the priority list will go up if there's a vacancy. No, it has happened in customs at the level of CO1. I'm not going to call the lady's name because she told me that she don't want to get embarrassed, so don't call she name here. It happened at the level of assistant controller of customs. The vacancies were there. The law decided that they are supposed to go into the job. No, what they're doing now, they are interviewing for them because the 2 years passed. But the 2 years didn't pass when the vacancy occurred. And it doesn't only happen in customs, it happened to his sister at the Labor Department. One of the best labor officers that got in Barbados. And he was on the priority list. And to show you what happened, they brought in somebody who got into the department and said, wait, I know there's all this work you're going to do. I don't want that job. Mind you, the body interviewed for the job and got it. I didn't know what the job entailed. And then when that person got the job, when they turned up for work, they realized, oh, I can't do this. So there's a vacancy, it's a clear vacancy. And rather than put his sister in it, they try to get out of the department. Aided and abetted by this person who now is going to be the sole person talking to the Prime Minister's ear. I don't have any trust or confidence in them. They have been reaping havoc in this place, destroying lives, sending people to the mental, and talking about sending people to the mental. I had a case where one guy working at the Ministry of Public Works, he's a bit eccentric, sing calypso and stuff, and he was away from work for a little bit. He was on sick leave. And word spread that he was in the mental. So when he turned back up for work, the personal officer said to him, I hear you did mental. And there's some rumors about this personal officer. So he said, I don't deal with any mental, I only deal with mental. Next thing you know, they said they call the community mental nurse and the police for this man. And people come with guns and carry him out of the mental, you know. I ain't kidding. Took him to the mental. And the man is insisting, I am not a patient of the mental. Never was. But the people there saying, man, they don't believe him because they got a file with the name similar to his there. The only difference was the middle name. And that he lived in St. Michael and the patient really lived in St. George. So that's why they thought, because he had the same name of this madman, they thought they had the right man. Lucky for him, the receptionist at the ministry, who is now dead, God rest her, she saw what was happening and called the union. And then called a lawyer too. And then the lawyer rushed down there and got him released. You know, they put him on special leave. Now, because they're too embarrassed now to bring him back to the service, because they thought he was a madman. Wasn't him. They put him on special leave. And after a year of special leave, they proceeded to the commission and said he was off for a year so we can medically board him. And the commission agreed, not knowing that he was not on sick leave. Because if you're on sick leave for a year, you can be medically boarded and put on your pension. They deceived the commission into believing that he was a madman and that he was on sick leave for a year. No, he was on sick leave granted by the chief personnel officer. And this is what we have presiding over the public service, and we change it up a little bit. But all we are doing is putting old wines in old wine in old plastic bottles, one-use, single-use plastic bottles like that. You know? People who've gone past their useful life, useful service in the public service, still reaping havoc in the lives of innocent people in the public service. There's a rampant disregard for the rules of the service. I mentioned the recruitment and deployment code, the priority list, but there's also another one where the Section 1311 of the Public Service Act says no post should be remain vacant, no permanent post shall remain vacant for more than a year. Let me find it for you. Let me read it carefully. Let me read it out. 1311. It says, no established office in the public service shall be allowed to remain vacant for a period of more than 1 year, except A, permission to allow the vacancy is granted by the Governor General on the advice of the Service Commission, or the office has been frozen by the Minister. Right? And for the purposes of subsection 11, frozen in relation to an office means that the office is one that the minister determines ought not to be filled. So that means that nobody is in them. So the minister will say, okay, when the minister frees the post, nobody goes in. But you have somebody in the post, even though the law says that you can't have them there for more than a year. I know of one case, a lady for 14 years. And then when they were doing the restructuring, they said, not this last one, the one before, they sent her home. Then she is clearly, she clearly has a legitimate expectation to be appointed to that job. After all, she's been there 14 years. But these people refuse to follow the law. You know, Senator Moore was talking about changing. She said here, for efficiency. It isn't changing for efficiency. It is changing for control. They are changing the laws so that they can terrorize and control the public service. There's another aspect. People, you know, they say the post is what we're talking about. We have instances where people are not qualified for the jobs that they want to put them in. But the post is vacant. So you can't be appointed because you don't have the qualification. So you send the person to study. While other deserving people are there and are qualified, you refuse to fill the post for 5 years. It happened at the mental or the psychiatric hospital, then, as we call it. And to hold the post vacant for 5 years while the person that they wanted qualified for the job. When the law says you cannot do it for more than a year. And nothing happens to these people, you know. But worse yet, there's a section in the Code of Discipline that says if a head of department or permanent secretary is of the opinion, let me get the quote here again because I don't want to misquote. the Code of Conduct. Paragraph 4. (4)(2). The permanent secretary or head of the department shall, within 14 days of becoming aware of misconduct of a serious nature on the part of an officer, investigate the matter. And if the authorized officer is of the opinion that the public interest requires that the officer should cease forthwith to perform the functions of his office during the investigation, the permanent secretary or head of the department may suspend the officer on full pay for the purpose of carrying the investigation. You got 14 days to do it. I have members who have been on suspension on full pay for 4 years. One calling me all the time because she's miserable at home. Because it is an offense to work when you're in the public service unless you get permission. So you're home for 4 years, you go to the beach, after a while that gets stale. Full pay. Full pay. And they then they have to bring in somebody to do the work. So 2 people are being paid for that job. And they have directions here in the act that says how they must behave. And they refuse to do it. And they're going to call themselves the expert in public service thing and want to advise Prime Minister. Prime Minister should want to hear from them. 4 years. One is 5. One of my people recently went back to work because of 2. One was off for 4 years, the other one for 2. And after the investigation was concluded, there was no case against him. One fella I know of who was suspended now on half pay for 10 years for drawing plans because he didn't get permission. You want to see the kind of money that this person is causing public service? He was suspended for 10 years on half pay. I wrote to the commission and I pointed out to them because he approached me one day. I was at a meeting somewhere else and he approached me. And I asked him to come to my office, and he did. And I said, that can't be true. The offense that you commit, the maximum penalty is a reprimand in writing. So how you could be off for 10 years? Because even if they found him guilty, the most they could do is get a letter that you don't do it again. But he was home for 10 years. So then after my letter went through, the commission got a legal opinion. They called the man back to work, and they have to pay for 5 years pay. Because 10 years and a half pay. 5 years pay. And you have people presiding over this, and people telling them, so how much more damage can she do? But get 5 years pay, you want one thing? And this is 5 years pay without taxes, Because the taxes were taken out the half pay before. So this is 5 years at your gross that she calls the public service. Then we had another case where a fella got beaten at work. And the assailant said, I don't pay him, my lawyers will take care of me. And they did not bring charges against the villain. So so the guy is a member of my union, so I told him, look, since they beat you and nobody taking the police or the commission or nobody chief person or for you, every time you go to work, and you see the fella run out in front of you. The fella went to work for 8 years. Look in the office and see the fella and gone. They refuse to deal with either of them. 8 years. But what they did, the man's work was still to be done. Because he come in there and fighting with the fella and running out. So the work had to be done. So the chief personal officer gave them a temporary person to work in that position. While he's getting paid and running home from the person that can beat him. Yeah, this thing, you think I'm making sport? This thing happened. No, yeah, you see, he's telling me raise my hand. It happened. I could call names, but I can't do that here because I can notice. This happened. And you're talking about Director General? Director of Destruction. This here has to stop. You don't know? I am sorry for you. I am sorry for you. These people are causing too much harm. But worse, the final one that I want to talk about, sir, is a case where this is just prior to the commencement of this act that we're now amending, where the officers would be recommended for appointment. The ministry will send up the names after all of their, whatever their due diligence was, and they will send the names. They had a list of environmental health assistants. Environmental assistant 2. Those officers, names went up. And a person at PAD whose son name was not in the list, scratch up somebody's name and put in the salmon so that his son will be promoted. Well, the officer who was excluded, but there were 2 officers because they scratched up 2 names. They scratched up the name of some person in the Ministry of Health. Her son got a job, and this officer's son got a job. And scratched up 2 people who were recommended. I was at the NUPW at that time, and they took the matter to a lawyer and we went to court. Because those people whose names went up didn't come back down. They were recommended by the ministry to be appointed to these posts. But what happened? One of the people at PAD scratched out the person's name and put in his son. I drew that to the attention of the same chief personnel officer. I said it was nepotism. And she asked me, she looked at the list and said, what nepotism are you talking about? I said, you will not notice it in the names because the father named Broom and the son named McDowell. You know? But the officers who were excluded went to court. And the document, so the court ordered discovery. Some lawyer better explain discovery. You know, you got to declare the documents you got to share the other side. The court ordered discovery. So you had to get the document shared. And so PAD said the file missing. They can't find the file. So the court said, but since there was communication between PAD and the Ministry of Health, that we can get the Ministry of Health file. Because you're going to have copies on both files. You know what happened? The Ministry of Health file went missing too. And those girls who were excluded, who were unfair and taken advantage of, are still languishing, while the person who benefit even become union presidents and all kind of thing. And mind you, those people are still languishing. The case ain't done because conveniently, you imagine two separate government departments losing files on the same topic, you know, and the departments, you lose one and then lose one. It is a conspiracy. This is what Minister Jordan was talking about. We have to do better. Yes, change the public service for efficiency. But this is not a change for efficiency at all. This is a change for control. This is a change to control ministers. Because, you know, when you come in, you as a minister, you don't know the public service. I'm not a trick here. The leader, but the leader is not, and he knows he gets his fair share. They do it all the time. But there is law in place to deal with them. I don't know what the Prime Minister and their ministers are afraid of. Then you got a permanent secretary, admin officer, a chief personnel officer, a director general, lying to you. It is an offense punishable by dismissal. Report the matter. Do something about it. Because what it is doing, it is causing a lot of public servants to turn up for work angry, and then not doing the work. Because here I am disadvantaged, I'm being unfair, and I can't get the justice. And a lot of them are scared. A lot of them are scared, even to stand up for their rights. And we come in here and we pass rules and laws and stuff and leave them to, according to the minister, Jordan, not me, demons to implement. I would have called him something much stronger. Yes. Mr. President, these, I'm summing up. These amendments are only necessary because people don't have integrity. The last commissions that were in place saw themselves as DLP commissions, not public service commissions or police service commissions. So they were not acting in the best interest of the public service. This government now had to come in and try to fix it. I didn't like the fix, but they had to do something. I would have done it differently. All right? But it was not my call. That's why I didn't oppose it when we debated the last time, because it was not my call. I know that they had to go. But it is not only them that got to go. Because the people who were advising them should be gone with them too. Not promoted and not given more power. The public service, when I started in public service, Senator Moy will be interested in this, I worked national insurance, income tax, immigration. I even had to deal land tax, price control. I was all around the public service, so I know it well. Attorney General. No, I don't go to prison. I didn't go there. No, well, not for work. Yeah.
Senator, I was thinking that it might be easier for you to indicate the departments in which you did not work.
Yes, I think that would have been. I think, sir, that would have been easier. That would be easier. So I have a lot of experience around the public service, and I know national insurance too. I had inland revenue. I had a lot of wide experience, and I see what is going on. I know what is happening in the public service, and a lot of people come to me and complain about their treatment. It pains me sometimes because there's a provision if you are aggrieved by the conduct of an officer. You can report it, but if it is a senior or even the person at your own level, you file a grievance. That is provided for in Section 12 of the Public Service Act. The Act then sends you to the force schedule and they direct you how a grievance is supposed to be done. It says the aggrieved officer reports to his supervisor, and the supervisor has 3 years in which to deal, 3 days in which to deal with the matter. If you are not satisfied, you can return the matter to the permanent secretary, who has 7 days to deal with the matter. Failing that, you can go to the permanent secretary, Ministry of Civil Service, or the chief personnel officer. 10 days. And then, if that is not done, or you're not satisfied with that position, you can go to the head of the public service. Sir, that's 30 days. I have not seen one of these matters done under 7 months. So while you are grieved and suffering, nobody is doing anything about it. And I always tell people, for Christ's sake, go to the permanent secretary, Ministry of Civil Service, not the chief personnel officer, because you ain't getting nowhere. No, they combine those two posts. So poor fella, you don't be aggrieved now, but they ain't gonna help you. Something has to be done. The civil service needs, we have some very good people in public service, but they're being forced out by the level of incompetence that is senior to them. We are losing good people. We are losing good people to the private sector, and we are losing good people to the mental, because it drives them mad. Yeah. Sir, the public service needs a commission of inquiry. And let me see where the chips fall. I'm begging. Get Truth and Reconciliation Commission, something to get this nastiness out. You know, we have created in the public service some people who they ain't got no power home. You know, they ain't got no power home. Wives is bossing about and things so they can't work, man, and make people life miserable. I know of examples in the fire service. Not the two comments don't relate.
Isolated case or?
No, general. Oh, my wife is the boss. I admit that. Where you going? But I still got a little power. But these people have no power whatsoever, so they come to work. The only place where they got power and they show the manhood. Terrorist people. I went to a case in the public, at the fire service a few months ago now. It was a Wednesday morning. I had to go there first and run it here after. The Governor General, under the Delegation of Functions, Public and Police Service Commission, Delegation of Functions Order, it is one SA 122 of 1974, I think it is, has delegated certain disciplinary functions to certain heads of the department. If the Governor General has the power, and the Governor General delegate that power to you, you can't further sub-delegate it. I saw a Latin maxim that says, delegatus non potest delegare. Check it out, meaning a delegate can't sub-delegate. But you have in the fire service, the chief charging people with an offense. He's charging you and telling his deputy, you hear the case. He's delegating to his chief. He can't delegate, but even if he could, I'm the boss, and they charge a fella, and you can come and don't bring guilty when they tell you charge, there's no justice. It happens all about the place, and the regulations speak to it. Regulation 4.3, the Code of Conduct, the Code of Discipline, it speaks to if the head of the department is involved in the matter, he has to refer to the commission, and the commission would delegate a person at his level. Not one of the juniors, to carry out the investigation. So that means the commissioner will get somebody else. I remember I had a situation where under the last administration, they tried to railroad a senior person at the level of permanent secretary to get rid of him. And they put the permanent secretary in. I said, no. The only body that can hear that, but at senior level would have been a judge, DPP, Auditor General. So they get the Auditor General to hear it. Auditor General here and said it's foolishness to kick out the case. But you have to have some person senior to the body charging. And certainly if the body is junior to the person doing the charging in their department,
Proceed, Senator Frank.
if you have some person junior to you, you are the boss, you tell you, look, go in and do this case, bring back, am I guilty here? If you don't bring back guilty, nothing can happen. Your ass is, you know what? Your,
Say in front, and just,
you know, it's
the
brass.
language.
We have to fix the public service. It is broken. It is badly broken, and it is badly broken because of operatives within the public service who take it upon themselves to deceive their seniors being the ministers of government, and they allow them to run rampant over the public service. This process has to stop because, sir, Barbados, I would not like to see a situation where people take matters into their own hands, and it is reaching that point. I had to put a man in my car one day and drive away until he come before you get yourself in trouble because he wanted to do something. He was angry. He was innocent, but they were going to do, and they said, "Look, come, I can let me do the case for you. You come, don't get yourself in trouble. You got little children." And I put him in my car and drive out till he calm down and talk with them all the way because these people. Yes. Because actually, a psychiatrist told me when I sent people to see her, because I sent 10 people to see psychiatrists who come to see me. I said, look.
She comes to see you, the psychiatrist.
No. The persons who come to see me, when they realize that they need help.
Okay.
No. When the person, I said to them, don't get me wrong. You need more help than I can give. I don't have the skills. He said, what do you mean? I said, and I tried to cushion it to make them sound that nothing wrong with them mentally, you know. I said, but you know you need to talk to somebody. I sent 10 persons to see psychiatrists, one psychiatrist in particular. And that psychiatrist called me back one day. They said, Mr. Franklin, you got great clinical skills? I said, I got great clinical skills. I know when people are disturbed. I can see it in their face.
That's not a dead wife. That's not a
It is happening throughout this place. People are being mistreated. Mind you, know that I have some thing in the private sector as well. It is happening there too, but it is rampant in the public service.
in the society.
So I am appealing to the government to fix this broken public service. The unions will help. Trust me, we will help. But you need to do something, and you need to do it urgently. You cannot come to work to earn a living, to support your family, and be angry all the time because of the treatment that you are getting. Something will break. Either the person will break or they will break somebody. We need, as I said earlier, some sort of inquiry into this public service. And I want especially to deal with the outstanding cases. Because I can tell you something, you know. When you put the public service in court, chief personal officer and the like, you know what happens? The cases get parked because the courts, people in the courts hide the files for you. And then when it get to the case with the judge, now the judge is now frightened to do work because now we have a constitutional amendment that says that if you don't do the work, get decision, it can be misconduct. So the judges now are not even taking cases. And we have a lot of cases in the public. So I have several because I've engaged attorneys to work on some behalf of some of my members after I couldn't get in the result. And they're languishing in court because you can't get a date. Sometimes you can't get a date because people hide the files and they can't find them. You know how many times you can't find a file in the registry? And people have remained either suspended or out of work or waiting for a decision whether they will get some money, and the decision is not coming up. I spoke too long. And I don't want to speak like this again. I want this matter fixed. I need it fixed. Mind you, it provides a lot of work for me, but it is too much work to handle. When you have things that shouldn't happen and you know they shouldn't happen, I shouldn't be reminding senior officers that you did a matter last week. You were proven to be wrong. And then you come back and do it again. You don't learn from precedent? Senator Moore will tell you. We were at a meeting one day, a couple of weeks ago, and the director of finance and planning was presiding over the meeting. I said to him, what are you doing here? This is not your business. You have no authority whatsoever to hear a matter in this department. But he insisted he must hear. I said, but you didn't hear with me. No, she was there. She heard. But that same person, did the same thing 5 years ago. The case went before the disciplinary panel, and his disciplinary panel had to try it back. He said, because you did it wrong. You know you done it wrong again. Same man. We got to stop employing fools in high places. Thank you, sir.
Senator Holder.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy President. Forgive me if I need a few seconds to pull my thoughts after that diatribe a few moments ago. One would appreciate the need to compose oneself. Mr. Deputy President, I am sure that there is a trade union in this country that will receive several calls in the ensuing days for membership. And I gather that may very well be the intention of such a speech. Mr. Deputy President, we have challenges in our public sector. Let us be realistic. We have challenges in our public sector. I think that Senator Franklin, who spoke before me, in a sense agreed to that reality. And we are here this afternoon debating these two pieces of legislation in an effort to try to address some of those challenges. We do have challenges. And so I want to couch my very short intervention around the theme of fit for purpose. Fit for purpose. We must become fit for purpose. Now, I'm not going to stand here and speak to anyone's civil servant. I do not confess to know as many persons as my colleague who spoke before me knows. But what I would share from the perspective in particular of the private sector that has to engage the public sector on occasion for the carrying out of a myriad of activities, that we do have some challenges. And so I think that the senator who led off debate on these issues would have used the term efficiency. And she spoke, Senator Moore that is, spoke to the need to bring greater efficiency to the public sector. Now, let me also hasten to add that I agree with the notion that for decades, Barbados has had a very committed and reliable and I'll even say credible civil service in the discharge of their responsibilities. We've seen employees that have shown a level of efficiency that Barbados can be proud of. This is a fact. I don't know that anyone in this chamber can, in all good conscience, say otherwise. Barbados has been known for that. We have, over decades, been able to assist our neighboring colleagues across not only CARICOM, but even wider in providing models and providing reports. We've joined various think tank type mechanisms to help with improving the delivery of services and so on. So we've had an efficient public sector. I'm sure all of us will agree that if you go and you turn on your tap, Mr. Deputy President, there is every possibility that water will flow. So in other words, we have seen over time a level of efficiency that allows us to depend on the services that are provided by our government officials. This is a fact. However, in this 21st century, when we need to focus even more on improving the productivity of our country, when we need to focus even more on becoming more competitive as an economy, I dare say that we need to pay attention now to how do we go about bringing some of those improvements to our public sector. And again, let me draw on some data, because I think that research is important. Information ought to be used to inform policy, inform laws and improvements and so on. And we can see from the World Economic Forum's report that they do annually on a number of countries, 140 odd countries, that they look at the competitiveness of the economies, that year after year, Barbados has been losing its ranking. Barbados has been on the decline. The facts are that in 2012-13, for example, where we ranked 44 out of 144 economies, we were unable to maintain this position, and actually this was a decline from even prior years. In 2019, we were at 72 out of these countries in terms of our competitiveness, Mr. Deputy President. So we have been losing our ranking relative to the competitiveness of our economy. But it goes further in the reports to suggest that a key reason has been the poor work ethic in our labor force and the inefficient government bureaucracy. You know, we've seen these two factors relative to doing business emerging in these reports year after year after year. Inefficient government bureaucracy, poor work ethic in the labor force. Now, these two things, in my view, ought to be top of mind for us if it is we're going to improve our economy, if we are going to become a more competitive jurisdiction. And when we look at these points, they speak to the issue of morale. They speak to the issue of how we deliver our services to citizens and those who come here to do business with us. They speak to the kind of labor market that we have. And so I think, Mr. Deputy President, that these two bills before us today are intended to help to address these issues. And I'm sure that Senator Franklin would agree with me that we do have these problems of poor work ethic and bureaucracy in government, and therefore we ought to look now at how do we improve on these situations. So the bills before us are intended to create some commissions. 4 commissions are identified here. The Judicial and Legal Services Commission. Now, why do we need this one? There was a Judicial Commission before, but clearly it was not working, Mr. Deputy President. It was not working. It was not working, so we're looking to have a Judicial and Legal Service Commission. The Administrative, General, and the Professional Service Commission. This replaces, I gather from the data, the Public Service Commission. The Protective Services Commission, where we're bringing together the police and prisons, etc. Good? As well as the Teaching Services Commission. Good. So we have several commissions here, and I think that when I look at the information, I see three key things that this new model is intended to do. First of all, not only is the focus now going to be on efficiency, but I'm seeing greater effectiveness in the delivery of our services. Because we need now to go from just being an efficient economy and efficient society to becoming more effective. And what do I mean by that? Again, the Global Competitiveness Report suggests that Barbados has been at the efficiency level for, I believe, it's more than a decade. More than a decade. Our country has been considered relatively efficient, and by that I gave the example earlier with the water. You go and you turn on your light switch on the wall. What do you expect in Barbados? Electricity. Light will come on. So we have been relatively efficient in being able to provide services that persons can fairly depend upon. And therefore, we've been able to maintain that in the Global Competitiveness Report. But we need to go beyond that. We need to reach the next level, which is being innovative. An innovative economy, I think, is where we want to strive for. We want to be not only efficient, but effective. We want to ensure that we are not only giving reliable services when persons come to do business with us, but we are effective in so doing. That means that we are using maybe less resources to produce the particular outcome. We are maximizing on the use of technology and other forms of productivity and so on. We want to be more effective. We want to know that yes, you may join a line at the licensing authority to renew your driver's license, and you know that at the end of the process, you will have a driver's license renewed, isn't it? You will have a driver's license renewed. But Mr. Deputy President, if you have to spend the whole day to do that, but then you're not being effective. You are not being effective in the delivery of the service. Because as we know, especially from a private sector perspective, time is money. And if time is money, it argues, I believe, and rightly so, that we cannot expect persons to spend an entire day just to conclude one simple transaction of having a driver's license renewed. But that is not being effective. And so we're saying that looking at these commissions and moving to this state, moving to this particular model, allows us to become a lot more effective. And a few examples, Mr. Deputy President, would include things like addressing complaints when they come from civil servants. Complaints against a person relative to safety and health issues, relative to length of shift issues, complaints relative to even customer service. Even how the supervisor or the manager in the department treats a particular employee. Whatever these complaints are, uniforms, whatever they are. The facts are that now we are seeing that it is taking an inordinately long time to address a simple issue of complaints from employees. But that ought not to be. That ought not to be the case. Not only that, promotions, requests for transfers. I know, for example, in a particular organization, when you are recruited there to work, sometimes you spend 3, 4, as much as 6 months going to work every day before you are paid. Before you are paid, Mr. Deputy President. Now, who in this day and age can be working for 6 months? 6 months before they can draw a salary. 6 months before they can receive their emoluments. And oftentimes, it is because you have this commission in place with thousands upon thousands of employees that they have to administer, they have to treat to, they have to manage, and they're not able to get to those issues and get to deal with the unique issues affecting a particular employee. Mr. Deputy President, this is untenable. This is untenable. This ought not to be happening in a 21st century Barbados. 6 months, I know this for a fact. 6 months on the job. before being paid, going to work faithfully every day, discharging their responsibilities. But when it is the 26th, when it is payday, unfortunately, they're not receiving their emoluments. No, Mr. Deputy President, I'm of the view that there needs to be greater effectiveness. That means that a commission in the past that was responsible for 10,000 civil servants is not efficient, is not effective. You cannot effectively address the issues that are coming up from those persons in a timely manner. And I would believe that this is a part of the intention and the vision behind the amendments that we are seeing here today. But so not only are we seeing greater effectiveness, not only is that going to come from these amendments, but I think greater accountability as well. Greater accountability. Now, in fairness, Mr. Deputy President, we have a civil service of, let's say, 25,000 employees. I'm unsure of the exact number. But if you have about 25,000 employees, how is it that 2 commissions can effectively administer the issues relative to 25,000 employees? Not possible. It is not possible. We need to move, yes, to greater technology, but you cannot expect two commissions, 2 services commissions, to cater to the needs of 25,000 employees. And so I support a decentralized approach. I support having these 4 in an effort to try to bring greater accountability to the process. Managing the resources better, managing our government resources, managing the taxpayers' resources. There's a need, in my view, for our leaders to understand and appreciate the level of duty of care and the fiduciary responsibility that they have in how they discharge their responsibility as leaders. We all know John Maxwell. I'm sure most of us in here know John Maxwell is a leadership guru of our time. And he is quoted as saying that everything rise or fall on leadership. Everything rise or fall based on leadership. And so therefore we need to bring a greater level of leadership to how we discharge our responsibilities. So I'm seeing more accountability and greater accountability coming out of these processes. Mr. Deputy President, we have a situation here in this country in the past where within the Police Services Commission in particular, I cannot stand here and say that I felt that there was a higher level of accountability. I can't say so. Because in the Police Services Commission, you would have the Commissioner of Police making the recommendations for promotions within the police force, and a Police Services Commission, whose leader and or leaders, let me be very careful, are not themselves police officers, are not themselves within the rank and file of the force. But they are staying on the outside, and they want to be the ones to determine who are given appointments and promotions and so on in the Royal Barbados Police Force. No, that should not happen, Mr. Deputy President. But I go further. Because this was in the public's domain, so I believe I can speak to it. That you have then a chairman of a Police Services Commission who became a political operative of a leading political party in this country, a senior officer. I don't know, Mr. Deputy President. I don't know if he was always a political operative. I can only say from what I saw in the press that at one point in time, his nomenclature was General Secretary. I can only speak to that. At one point in time, he held that post. So how can you be the General Secretary of a political party and be the chairman of the Services Commission, Mr. Deputy President, and discharge your responsibility in a fair and transparent manner when all the evidence is there to the contrary, because The recommendations from the commissioner for promotions within the rank and file of the police force have often been turned down, rejected, without even any proper explanation. Mr. Deputy President, what we saw in the past was not accountability. And I'm hopeful that with these amendments now, putting in place the Protective Services Commission that reduces now the number of employees that this commission will have responsibility for, that then allows for decentralization and so on, that you can see a greater level of accountability. Having now the Administrative, General, and Professional Service Commission, that the same thing will happen. Greater accountability should occur within these commissions. It was not the case before. And so I am of the view that not only will there be greater effectiveness and greater accountability, but I'm hopeful to see greater creativity. I want to see greater creativity. Now, why am I saying this? Gone are the days, Mr. Deputy President, when a person leaving school, a person graduating from university and so on, that they just, headed to the civil service or sought a job within the civil service just for the sake of job security and job tenure. Gone are those days. Gone are those days. Remember growing up, most of us in here can attest to this fact, that instead of pursuing a career in entrepreneurship, that your parents encourage you to try to find a government job. Go and get your studies, get your degree and so on. And try to make sure you get a government job. Why? Because it was seen as a place where your job would be secure, where you would be secure. You'd get security and tenure. But gone are those days. It's the truth. It cannot just be about pursuing a job in the civil service for that. I am saying, and I'm calling for our leaders now to try to create an environment within the various public sector departments that allow for greater creativity to emerge, greater creativity from employees, that they are incentivized to be able to contribute and input into processes that will improve the delivery of service to citizens. It cannot be just about being there Monday to Friday because you think it is a secure environment. No, it has now to be contributing in a creative manner to how service is being delivered to citizens in this country. That means, I go back to John Maxwell, that means that we need to see a paradigm shift in how our leaders lead. Now, I'm not going to get into debate about what was said in the other place, about the supervisors and managers and so on. What I will say is that collectively, we have a responsibility to make sure that our leaders lead. And if they are not leading and leading effectively, then we have to do something about it. That is my view, Mr. Deputy President. We have a responsibility for that. Because our workers, I want to believe in them, and I do believe in them, our workers, when they join whatever government department, whatever or statutory organization, and so our workers have creativity to bring to the process of developing those institutions, of delivering service to citizens and so on. They have, all of us innately have been given certain giftings that we are responsible to our Creator to discharge in the earth. We all have. So the days and the view that, oh, you're just going to sit and move one file from this folder to the next. No, we have to dispel that notion and create an environment where employees can contribute to the process of the development and delivery of services to our citizens, to add value to our organizations, add value to our departments. Why? Because we must believe that they come with that value. They come instinctively, and it is innately in them to do so. We can no longer just see them as cattle, and that's why, Mr. Deputy President, I don't even use the term, human capital, I hate it. I don't like the term. I don't like the term. Because somewhere along the line, we have not seen our people as contributors to the process, creatively and productively. And we have to change that paradigm. We have to move to a place where we understand and appreciate that it is not only in the public sector that you're going to get creativity, or that you ought to get creativity. It's not only there, but in the public sector. Mr. Deputy President, I had the wonderful experience some years ago of visiting Singapore on a study tour. I tell you, I was so moved at that experience. When I saw the contribution that the civil servants made to Singapore as a state, to the point where it looked as if it was law. First of all, they were paid better than the public sector employees, by the way. Let me share that now. They were paid better. Civil servants, they were highly paid better than many a private sector entity. Right? Highly paid. Because, as the folks are sharing with us, their leaders had the view that not only would paying your civil servants reduce corruption within the state, that was not the underlying reason. The view was that the kind of service that your government provides in enabling business and trade and commerce to occur, because it is a private sector that trades, that you needed therefore to attract civil servants that were creative and energized, that were engaged and really wanted and understood the importance of economic development and growth and so on. And therefore you had to incentivize them to do so. So you went and you looked for the best. Highly competent. They were highly qualified and highly paid because they understood the contribution of a public sector in economic growth and development. And I'm saying that we have to get to that point in Barbados. That it cannot be about just thinking that, economic growth and development will come from the private sector, or let us try to bring the private sector together and ask the private sector to trade. And so, no. You have to understand that it is the government, the public sector, that provides needed services, important services, to ensure that the private sector can do what it does. And so we want to incentivize our civil servants. We have to incentivize them. And let it begin, therefore, by creating an environment where they feel that they are valued, where they feel a sense of worth. Not that they come in on mornings at 10 o'clock, punch in, and leave for the rest of the day, and that's it. If those kinds of things are happening with the Deputy President in the civil service, they need to be called out, and they need to be dealt with. And we expect that our unions will agree, and therefore work to ensure those things are stamped out. If these things are happening, they ought to be dealt with. Because we need to see an engaged civil service that is providing the kind of services, as I said, that we need as a country to propel us to the next level. So with these commissions, not only am I expecting greater effectiveness, greater accountability, but I'm also expecting greater creativity. I want to see that these commissions now work with the other heads of departments and so on to improve the morale and to improve the working environment within our civil service and within our public sector, that we can have an engaged public service helping with the transformational process for Barbados. So, Mr. Deputy President, I agree with the amendments. I support the effort at trying to bring Barbados to a place where this, I call it an indictment that has been upon us from the Global Competitiveness Report, can be addressed and can be corrected. that as we go forward, we can see ourselves moving from number 72 and going downward, getting to a better position relative to our competitiveness, that the issues of the poor work ethic in the labor force and the inefficient government bureaucracy can be addressed so that we can become a lot more efficient, effective, and competitive as a state. And with those few words, Mr. Deputy President, I support the amendments before us this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Holder. I recognize Senator Cummins.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. I just have a few words to share today, Mr. President, in support of this item on our agenda. Mr. President, we have heard from Senator Franklin, who gave a very impassioned speech on what he has experienced as the nature of treating to public service appointments and the resolution of industrial relations matters within the public service.
Just hold a minute.
Thank you, and please continue. Mr. Cummings.
And Mr. President, thank you very much. Mr. President, in Senator Franklin's comments, we heard a lot around the challenges with treating to the way in which the legislation is implemented at the technicians level, and the differences, Mr. President, that Senator Franklin perceives to be in existence between the policy intention and the implementation of that policy at the technical level. And Mr. President, I want to start my comments by speaking a little bit about the World Development Report from the World Bank, which talks about what really is the overarching matter that sits at top of this question of how we deal with issues in the public service. And they talk, Mr. President, about the role of good governance, public sector reform, and the way in which we treat to public sector institutions. Mr. President, they say the following. They say building effective and accountable institutions is necessary to address development issues, especially in developing countries, as they seek to reduce poverty. Mr. President, when we talk about things like the Judicial and Legal Service Commission, the Administrative General and Professional Service Commission, the Protective Services Commission, and the Teaching Service, and I want to start with the Teaching Service. When we talk about these kinds of commissions, Mr. President, we're talking about those that are developmental in terms of the education sector and those who are producing our youngsters who are going to be our leaders of the future. We're talking about our administrators who are going to be treating to the implementation of policy in the public service on a day-to-day basis. We're treating also to, Mr. President, with those who are on the end of the spectrum in the judiciary, but not necessarily in the judiciary, but certainly, well, the Judicial and Legal Service Commission, yes, but also those persons who have a responsibility for prosecutorial obligations on behalf of the state. And so it spans the entire spectrum, Mr. President, from the youngest and the most innocent in the teaching service, those professionals and those Barbadians who will be grooming those youngsters, to those who have run afoul of the law on the other side, and those who therefore will have to be interacting with our police force, or those of us who need the protection of our judicial authorities and our police force, Mr. President. And so these are extraordinarily important institutions that we are attempting to introduce here into our development process. But more importantly, Mr. President, as part of an overall approach to public sector reform. But Mr. President, there are at least three things that help to shape these discussions. There are the formal laws, which yes, we have here, and these things are now being enshrined in the commissions. But we have a series of informal norms and practices as well. And Senator Franklin spoke. I see that he has joined us again on the government side, and perhaps he wishes to take up a space on this side, Senator Franklin. But he spoke a lot about what can best be considered informal norms and practices that are counterintuitive in reality to the actual legislation that he has described. And we talk about organizational structures, but specifically in this case as well, Mr. President, we are talking also about organizational culture. What has emerged as the culture of the public service. And in the other place, when the Minister with responsibility for labor introduced this measure, he did make some very strong comments. And I want to say, Mr. President, that I once was a young graduate, fresh-faced and out of university, freshly out of university, Mr. President, and walking into the public service, into what at the time was my chosen career as an international relations practitioner. And I have to say, Mr. President, that I do understand the importance of making a way for our youngsters who have the creativity that Senator Holder was talking about, who have the innovation that we're talking about, who come into our service bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. But you often do encounter those who see their role only as that to put you in your place and to ensure that the enthusiasm that you bring into your space is very quickly dampened. And the expense of that, Mr. President, is not just yours and disengaged workers. It is not just those persons who withdraw from the system, but the expense of that, Mr. President, for a country who invests 30% of its annual budget every year in education is that we are turning away our brightest and our best. We are stifling the very creativity that we have here, Mr. President, and we are putting the students who have come through, our teachers in our schools, in a position where they want to go elsewhere. And then we ask ourselves, at the end of that, why is their brain drained, Mr. President? Why are our people leaving? Why are our best not coming into the public sector? Why are they not developing, Mr. President? Because we have helped to create that, Mr. President. I want to make a couple of comments, though, specifically on this. I want to say, Mr. President, that the process of reform, when we deal with these commissions, one of the things that the World Bank report, in the World Development Report, talks about is the importance of utilization of specialist skills. It says that it is important to have the use of specialist skills in certain evolving areas. Mr. President, when Senator Moore was introducing this bill, she talked about the way in which technology has transformed how we do business today, as opposed to how we did it back then. She talked about when she was a youngster and how she operated very differently than how she operates today. Talking about the way in which cars are fueled now by the sun in some instances, as opposed to what they were then, Mr. President. And so technology has changed the way in which we do business. And so the utilization of specialist skills, Mr. President, specialist skills that understand how these sectors have evolved over time. Specialist skills that understand how the teaching service is about more now, Mr. President, than simply having a teacher-to-student ratio in our classrooms, that is more about children are to be seen rather than to be heard. A specialist commission, Mr. President, that understands that teaching has evolved into an entirely different methodology and an entirely different sector now, today, in 2019, than it was when many people first entered the teaching service. Those specialist skills, Mr. President, have a direct correlated impact on our own growth and development process. It has a direct impact, Mr. President, on the quality of students that Senator Greenidge and Senator Springer, who talk about their love of teaching, can therefore produce, Mr. President, because the way in which we interact with a lot of these systems, Mr. President, must evolve. And I want to use a very specific example. Today we've talked a lot about customs. And I want to use a concrete example, Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, the Customs Department, we know has chronic shortages, and we know also needs to benefit from the addition of manpower to address the critical shortages. We have heard that reported in the press. It has been spoken of in the other place, Mr. President. And we hear about what it means in terms of manpower shortages. We hear about the impact that it has had as a result of the failure to fill posts and to designate these customs officers, 3 and customs officer 4. We hear about all of those things, Mr. President. But I want to make this thing real to us, because Senator Holder, when she was talking about competitiveness and how these things impact, and the doing business indicators, there's a very direct relationship between the challenges in customs, Mr. President, created by manpower, but also differentiated skills, Mr. President, those specialist skills that the World Development Report now says are needed in our public sector. So, Mr. President, we spent a moment for another purpose over the last few weeks, certainly over the weekend and heading into Monday, looking at how Barbados is performing at our border compared to other jurisdictions. And we were not looking at countries that had their systems in place. We were not looking at countries that also have a highly skilled labor force necessarily. We're talking about optimization of technology and the way in which border agencies have evolved over time using that technology. Mr. President, in Barbados, for border compliance, in terms of exporting, it takes 41 hours for us to transact a single clearance on average. 41 hours, Mr. President. In neighboring St. Lucia, a smaller economy with fewer skills, it takes 27 hours, Mr. President. In terms of documentary compliance, because the industry has changed from where it was 20 years ago and 10 years ago and 5 years ago to where it is today, Mr. President, and it has evolved. Today, it takes 54 hours, manpower hours, all manually done by an individual. Today, 54 hours to process documents. In St. Lucia, it takes 19, Mr. President. 19. At the border, in terms of compliance, our agencies for importation, it takes 104 hours, Mr. President. 104 hours. In St. Lucia, Mr. President, it takes 27 hours. 27. I say that, Mr. President, to say that the industry has changed. Barbados's failure to change with it in real time has a direct cost attributed to our development process, but most certainly to our competitiveness. What this means, Mr. President, is that business that could be attracted to Barbados, investment that could be attracted to Barbados, is going to look at these numbers which are publicly available in the research, and they are going to take their business elsewhere. If we don't reform the way in which our agencies function, Mr. President, if we don't reform the way in which we approach populating these industries, because once upon a time, Mr. President, the way in which you treated with these very issues is most certainly what is being done now. The way in which you taught, Mr. President, is not always what is done now. I remember, and I give the example, Senator Franklin talked about the exhibition on the scholarship winners, and I have to say that that is very much a bugbear of mine in the education sector, for example. Mr. President, when my own daughter was going through the education system, she struggled, Mr. President, with the science subjects because she by nature was a creative. She was an arts student. And the school system as structured presently did not afford her the tools that were needed for her to get through the system. It's not successfully. Mr. President, we then had to find skills outside in the lessons industry that assess what kind of learner she was, Mr. President, that figured out what got her brain ticking. And I remember simple things, Mr. President, that are not available to our school system. So for biology, to understand reefs, her lessons tutor took them snorkeling out by the Hilton one Sunday morning. And that was how she understood marine biology. I remember for geography, when we were looking at soil samples, it was one Saturday morning, the lessons tutor took the group of them up to River Bay to take soil samples, Mr. President. That is not the kind of thing that is available in our school system. Unless you are capable of paying for it outside and responding directly to your child's needs, which is what almost 100% of our top performers are able to benefit from, you are going to struggle in the system, Mr. President. And I say that to say that introducing these commissions, having that specialist expertise applied at the level of every single institution in this country is going to be critical to being able to identifying what those critical needs are, identifying the modalities for implementing them, but also being able to hire the brightest, the best, and the most forward-thinking and innovative of those who are capable of taking us from 2019 into the 21st, into the 22nd century, Mr. President. Because in many instances, we are still functioning in an institution, in a public sector, that is years past its sell-by date. And that is the reality, Mr. President. We are still functioning in institutions and with mindsets that are the way we did things in the 1990s, in the 1980s. Oh, we don't need to change, this is what we've always done. And those bright-eyed and bushy-tailed young professionals who are coming up with new knowledge, Mr. President, new excitement, new ways of doing things that are being applied in countries all around the world are being shunted to the side, Mr. President, in favor of dates that have long expired. And with it, they are sacrificing country. They're sacrificing development. This is what we know. You don't need to do that. All you need to do is this, because that's what we did in the 90s. Mr. President, the world has changed. Mr. President, there are economies, like I just said, right here in this region. For documentary compliance time to import, Mr. President, it takes us in Barbados 74 hours. Right here in this region, it takes St. Lucia 14. What then does it take a developed economy elsewhere, Mr. President? We have to understand in this country that we are not talking about what we have always done on 166 square miles anymore. We're not talking about the way in which we've always done it on 166 square miles. We are a global nation, and just last week, in this same space, I believe it was Senator Rogers, who, when we were speaking about the Freedom of Barbados bill, who said we are a global nation. And so we have to keep pace, Mr. President. Our Protective Services Commission, our Police Commission, the way in which policing is done now, Mr. President, is built on certain fundamentals, but it is also transformed significantly today from what it used to be 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And our own failures, Mr. President, to implement reforms in real time and to make these things living instruments of our development processes is costing us development gains that will come back to disadvantage our children and our children's children, Mr. President. I always have these conversations from a development perspective because that is what I know. Senator Holder said that in a previous experience with Singapore, that it was amazing. And we had the conversation about payment scales between public and private sector. Mr. President, I want to endorse the statements made by Senator Holder, and I want to attach them at the same time to an earlier discussion that we had also in this place. Mr. President, we talked about incorporating people. Mr. President, we talked about making sure that we understand the importance of taking people along with us. Mr. President, if you look at countries like Singapore and countries like Rwanda, these are countries that function in a very different political space. And the differences in political space mean that their people see life very differently. In Rwanda, for example, on any given Thursday afternoon, even if you are a visitor to the country, you will see everything stop. And you will see the people of the country come outside and come to pick up their garbage and to clean up their communities and to engage in a community exercise around their neighborhoods, even in their workplaces. In Singapore, it is the same thing. There is a community approach to development, an individual responsibility for development. Here, we live in a nation, Mr. President, where it becomes a national furore if a teacher asks a child to pick up a wrapper. off the floor because you are not supposed to do that. But entire countries, Mr. President, collectively ensure that they take responsibility for their own development. We live in a country, Mr. President, where if next door to you, you have overgrown brush that is over onto the road, the thought of you taking your weed whacker and trimming it back may not cross your mind, Mr. President, but you will take to social media to say what the government is not doing. Mr. President, I remember when we were having difficulties with collection of garbage, which we're still having today. And in my community, it cost us $40 per person. In some communities, I'm told that I got my eye punched out, but it was less to have a collection and to take it to the appropriate place for disposal. But there are those who will bluntly refuse to pay even $10 if they were asked to at a community level to do any such thing, Mr. President, because we live in a different space. And when we get to the place in this country where we start asking the question, what can we do for our country? As opposed to only what can our country do for us, we will always have the situations where, unlike certain countries, we don't think we should always give back. We've heard most of the volunteer organizations talk about the low levels of volunteerism. We hear that all the time, Mr. President. We need to see that this is our country. We talk about persons who are, I'm sure I was talking today at lunch with the colleagues about comments that I saw recently on a social media post talking about public servants, including those in other spaces, being handsomely compensated. But the reality of it is that our public servants don't get paid for even a fraction of what they do in real terms, and certainly not in comparison with the private sector, Mr. President. That is the reality. But we have even an entitlement about what we expect from our public servants. We want them to give us everything, and we sometimes struggle to even give our public servants basic respect. Basic respect, Mr. President. We can't give them a thank you for service rendered. I had a conversation, Mr. President, just this week with someone who was arguing vehemently that you should not thank public officials or you should not celebrate public officials for working well in any given area. And I rejected that, Mr. President, because what is the difference between any public official and anyone else? In most instances, they're working for less than their value. They're giving less than you even, they're giving more than you are paying for, Mr. President. Our public service works hard. There are those that are problematic. There's no question about that. But they work hard, Mr. President. And the imposition of patronage, political interference, as we saw in the Police Services Commission in the last administration, as we saw in the Customs Department, which has decimated that department over many years, Mr. President, has found itself now bringing home the chickens to roost, where it not only has an internal impact on those institutions, but it has an external impact in terms of Barbados' ability to compete with others. Mr. President, I want to wrap up with the following, with one last comment. We can put the legislation in place. We can work over time on changing the organizational structure. We can work, Mr. President, on changing the culture of the space. But at the base of all of this, Mr. President, has to be an investment in people, our people, Mr. President. And in that investment, we have to be able to treat the people with respect and using integrity. Mr. President, I know there are a lot of people who like to talk about respect, but only when they're on the receiving side. They have great difficulty giving respect, and they don't necessarily identify with the notion of mutual respect. When we're dealing with appointments, recruitment, the management of personnel, the maintenance of skills, Mr. President, we're talking ultimately about people. And it's for that reason, Mr. President, that I want to urge that, and I see my colleague Senator Tate is here looking over her glasses at me. Mr. President, I want to urge that we take a new approach to public sector reform. We take a new approach that is less technocratic and far more people-centered to the introduction of these commissions, and that we make a commitment as a government, as we clearly have with this legislation, to seeing it through not just from the policy side, but also on the implementation side, Mr. President. And with those few words, I'm obliged to you.
Senator Grant, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. This contribution is definitely going to be a very short one. Definitely, sir. It is now, sir, it is now 5:45, and I know there are other matters that we have to, officers, senators here have to deal with, so I am not going to be long. I just wanted, sir, to lend my voice in support of these two bills. I think it is very important that we recognize that we need to have a civil service and civil service mechanisms and procedures that are relevant for this time. Senator Moyne, introducing these bills, made reference to vehicles. I do have to admit that I am not familiar with the vehicle that you have to use the cranking in order to get the vehicle started. But when she referenced vehicle, I think that sometimes the vehicle that we use within the public service for the execution of activities at times is somewhat archaic. I remember, sir, and I have no reason to believe that this has changed. When I was Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, and the Minister of Tourism would indicate that he wished a particular cabinet paper to be prepared. That would go from the Permanent Secretary to the Deputy Permanent Secretary, from the Deputy Permanent Secretary to the Senior Administrative Officer, from the Senior Administrative Officer to the Admin Officer 1, from Admin Officer 1 to Admin Officer 2. And then the cabinet paper would be written. And what would happen would be, it would go from Administrative Officer 2 to Admin Officer 1, and the Admin Officer 1 would look at it and see some changes and things that they wanted and send it back down to Admin Officer 2, who would make those changes, and then it would go up to the Senior Administrative Officer, who may see some changes and send it back down to come back up. I reference that only to suggest that we cannot, in this day and age, utilize vehicles with respect to the operation of government that are archaic. And I think that government is signaling through the bills before this honorable chamber that they certainly are seriously looking in the manner in which the administration of the public service is being undertaken. I do agree, Mr. President, that we have to ensure that persons are given the flexibility and the room to properly and adequately carry out their functions. And I heard Senator Franklin today make what I term as some horrific statements. I'm not saying, sir, that they're not true. I am saying, sir, that they are horrific in the manner in which he claimed certain elements of the public service have been behaving. And I want to say that I believe very strongly that this party in government has certainly communicated and demonstrated that it wishes to function in a manner which is fair which is equitable, which is transparent, and to allow persons with all the requisite knowledge and skills to function effectively within the public service. Of course, sir, as you are very aware, the Barbados Labour Party is a party that by its nature practices inclusion. And Senator Franklin as well would be very aware of that as a card-carrying member of the, oh dear, I'm so sorry, sir. I forgot that he is now a member of a new institution and would now not qualify for membership of the Barbados Labour Party. But he's very familiar. Sir, when I joined the Barbados Labour Party, I function, sir, as an assistant secretary to the then general secretary. And the senior assistant secretary to the general secretary was a goodly gentleman by the name of Caswell Franklin. And in a sense, he taught me a lot that I know with respect to the functioning of the party and the role as it relates to assistant general secretary. But I think the important element that I'm getting at is that I do not believe it is the desire or the intention of government to support inequality, to in any way support persons being victimized, and that the government will function in such a manner as to provide the opportunities for those who are qualified. I do have to say, sir, that one of the areas that concerns me relates to the emphasis that is placed in Barbados today on pure academic qualifications. And I wonder sometimes if we are not excluding individuals who have significant ability and who have the capacity and the competence and the experience to execute certain functions. I'm hearing, for example, there's a honorable senator. He was a teacher. He was a customs officer, immigration officer too. I learned today he's a piece of lawyer. I learned today, sir, that he's a psychiatrist. And he may not have his official academic qualifications. The one thing that he said that he is not good at is being a fisherman. Although I would say that he does in this chamber often engage in fishing expeditions. But he did indicate to us that he's not a good fisherman. But I think that we sometimes have to look beyond the academic qualifications, and we have to at times embrace persons who have the skills and the expertise and the knowledge. I remember, sir, there was a time in Barbados, I'm told that there were persons who functioned as solicitors, lay magistrates, I'm being told, who were not, who did not go through the academic training and who did not go to the bar, and who would have distinguished themselves in terms of the functioning of the law. I am not suggesting, sir, that the academic qualifications are not necessary and important. But what I am saying, sir, is that we have to ensure, particularly with a small society such as Barbados, where our resources are limited, that we are able to embrace and to utilize all segments and all resources that are available to us. I think, sir, that is extremely important. So that the amendments that are being made and the bills before this honorable chamber, they are extremely important. They are extremely important in creating a modern day framework for the functioning of the civil service. They are extremely important to ensure that all the different segments and elements identified, whether it be the Teachers Service Commission, the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, that they function properly and effectively. I'm told, sir, for example, as it relates to the Judicial and Legal Services, the Judicial Commission, as it presently is known, that that commission has not been meeting on a regular basis. That is what I'm told. We do have to ensure that our institutions are functioning properly and effectively. And I want to answer on this point, that very often in Barbados, people speak about their rights, but they do not often speak about their responsibilities. And we have to accept that as we function in certain jobs, we have to execute properly the responsibilities which we have. We do not simply do it for ourselves. We do it, Mr. President, for Barbados as a whole. Mr. President, it is now 5 minutes to 6 o'clock. I started at 5:45. With those very few words on this time, sir, I support the
Repeti. Senator Moore, our has come for you to wrap up.
all of the problems that lawyers judges that is discussed.
Mr. President, first of all, I would like to thank all honorable senators who contributed to this debate. Of course, they had varied thoughts and interpretations of the purpose of these amendments. But let me say once again and clearly, and I think it was well articulated by Senators Holder and Senator Cummins as to the rationalization and the necessity for these changes. And I will not belabor what they said in their contributions, but I certainly want to give some of the highlights because I think that they're worth reinforcing. Now, certainly, Senators Holder and Cummins spoke, and both of them spoke on some of the same issues, but in perhaps a slightly different manner. And they spoke about engaging the civil service to help with the transformation of Barbados. Of course, that's a necessity. I think it was Senator Cummins who spoke about all of the emphasis and responsibility not being just on the private sector, which oftentimes is what we do when it comes to looking for progress within employment. The public service is an important factor in the transformation of Barbados, to bring Barbados back to where we once were. And I don't think there are many people who would disagree with this comment, that Caribbean-wide, and perhaps even worldwide, many people for many, many years viewed Barbados as an island that was certainly on top when it came to all types of services, all types of industry. And in recent years, that perception seems to have changed. And we need to bring those things back. And the public sector, the public service, the civil service is an important aspect of that reemergence of Barbados, as I think it was once termed a country punching above its weight. So the things that were spoken about today, like incentives in the civil service, greater efficiency, greater accountability, competitiveness. I remember my colleague senator here speaking and using a fellow Caribbean island, St. Lucia, to show the length of time it took to provide particular services there and here, much less what time it would take in perhaps another jurisdiction that might be further along within its modernization and efficiency process. I think St. Lucia, Mr. President, if I'm not mistaken, may also have special significance to another senator sitting in here who may not necessarily have agreed with the rationalization for these amendments, and who certainly had a long discourse on all manner of things within the public service. Now, we also heard about technology and utilization of specialists and how this could evolve us, this island, this country of ours. And also too, we listened about the pay scale of public servants versus the private sector. And oftentimes, the inability of many people to recognize that, like anything else in life, even here today, I don't think it was recognized by some poor people, that their jobs, even though they don't earn what they would earn in the private sector, even though sometimes they get no thanks for their hard work, even though it's not recognized that some of the issues that they're confronted with is the fact that the modalities that they have to use in order to deliver some of these services perhaps are not as advanced as they should be, and they lack some of the requisite tools that they might need in order to complete some of the jobs that they need to in a more efficient way. But in spite of all of that, the public service of Barbados is an integral part of our continued development, and majority of these hard-working public servants, are deserving of some of the accolades that are given to them. Because as I said, just like anything else in life, we don't have perfection, but we certainly have the majority of people who work in the public service are working there for the betterment of this country. Now, Mr. President, I don't want to obviously prolong what has been said. I only want to hit some of these highlights to reinforce the reasons and the rationalization for these amendments, these much needed amendments, which I am hoping that all honorable senators in here will support this evening. And with that, Mr. President, I move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the bill currently under consideration, the Administrative Justice Amendment Bill 2019, be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
The administrative justice.
Is it is?
That one first. Administrative justice. Remember that we did a copy. This one.
We went through that one.
Leave the chamber. Mr. President, I beg to move that your honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into the committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of this bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
Chief Justice, any order paper?
We actually dealing with the public service Amendment Bill.
Does it matter which one you deal with first?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. 'Cause
So do
it's a cognate debate, but each must be passed separately. And you've dealt with the,
So what I'm asking is, does it matter whether we deal with them
We deal with 5 or we deal with
5 first, or 4 first and 5 second?
the actual item that was called, the item of business that was called was actually item number
4.
4.
Okay,
So you must deal with 4.
4 first, which is the public service.
Clause 1,
Mr. President, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2,
Mr. President, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
the schedule.
Schedule to the bill.
Mr. President, I beg to move the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
Question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that. Oh, Mr. Chair, I beg to move that you now report is honor the President, the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report this honour the President, the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now be read a third time.
Question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Public Service Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2019.
Question is that the bill under consideration do now pass and be so cited. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill has now been passed and will be so cited.
Order number 5 in the name of the Honourable Acting Leader of the Senate to move the second reading of the Administrative Justice Amendment Bill 2019.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that the bill presently under consideration be now read a second time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that your honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of this bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
The Senate is again in committee.
Clause 1,
Mr. Deputy President, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2,
Mr. Deputy President, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that clause 2 stand part. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Deputy President, I beg to move that clause 3 stand part.
The question is that clause 3 stand part. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Deputy President, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
This report to me, the passing of the bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Administrative Justice Amendment Act 2019.
The question is that the bill under consideration do now pass and be so cited. All honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. You think the ayes have it? The bill has now been passed. It's cited as the Administrative Justice Amendment Act 2019.
Mr. President, that brings us to the end of government business for the day. I beg to move that the Senate do now adjourn until next week, Wednesday, August 21st.
Question is that the Senate be now adjourned until next week, Wednesday, August 23rd at 11 a.m. All honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. You think the ayes have it? And this session is now adjourned until next week, Wednesday at 11 a.m.